All right, I'm back.
Can't see you guys on the stream. Hold on. Gallery? Is that changing? Because now I just see Frank on the screen. Hold on. All right, this might have to just be a pre-recorded thing. Hold on. Okay, there we go. There we go. We are good. All right, hold on. Now let me just get the lab real quick. Manage videos. I gotta get this thumbnail up. League chat now, and then we're good to go. Perfect. Okay, only viewer is me. Perfect. All right, you guys ready to go?
Team here is still. Yeah, I'm good.
All right, folks, we are back. This is another episode of Friends Who Ramble. We are doing the pre-draft rookie rankings. Of course, I do want to talk about the two big trades that went down today, as well as some of our desires for the Pats draft coming up. I mean, we are what? Call it 2 weeks away? Does it start on Wednesday
Yeah.
or Thursday? Are we
Thursday, 15 days
okay?
away.
Yep. So we're almost exactly 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. And then I believe it's 2 weeks after that we do the rookie draft. Before we get into all of that, of course, we're always going to hear from our sponsors at Sundog Multimedia. Sundog is an online communication and social media company. What started as a personal tool has since evolved into something much bigger, allowing users to communicate, research, and discover things that impact their lives and daily decisions. Sundog will collaborate with you to build and execute a modern yet nimble social media strategy by utilizing innovative and traditional media principles. Sundog is also a proud supporter of the Stop Soldier Suicide Foundation. You can follow them on Instagram at sundog_multimedia. That's Instagram at sundog_multimedia. Brains, brawn, and true professionalism. That's easy peasy moving and service. Muscle for hire, moving, assembly, errands, you name it, they will do it. Easy peasy is a multi-service team. If you need something, just ask. All right. We are here. Amaral, we always love to have you on for sort of rankings and drafts and all sorts of things like that. And it was you came to me, and I love to see that initiative because I was wondering how do I want to approach this, and especially it was tough for me because I don't think I have any picks except for my newfound fourth round pick that we all got this year. So I wasn't as locked in at first, and then you came to me and you kind of lit a fire under my ass, and here we are. We are now doing the rookie rankings. I was not expecting to get as into the mock draft season as I have become, as well as ranking all these, but I have spent the last week looking through, and I probably went through 5 different iterations of my rankings before I locked in on what I'm using for this show. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for always coming on the show. And Frank, we are always glad to have you on as well. I think this is your first official show appearance. Of course, you did the dispersal drafts, but I don't think that we've heard from you on the show since then. So welcome on, and welcome for the first time. And of course, you are live to tape, so watch what you say. But let's just get right into it, okay? Because we had two big trades go down today. Amaral, you were at the center of both of them.
Sure
I will
was.
say, and I'll give you a compliment sandwich. Uh, I like you a lot. You're a good guy. You're a good contributor to the league. I think you're a good player. That is the bread. That is the first layer of bread on the compliment sandwich. Of course, in the middle comes a little bit of criticism.
Let's hear it.
Uh, One of the trades, and of course, anything can happen, right? Any of these guys, Sam Laporta, Saquon Barkley, they could step outside of their house tomorrow, get hit by a bus, never walk again, and all of a sudden the trades age completely differently than what we know them as. But as of now, knee-jerk reaction, one of those trades is one of the most egregious trades I've ever seen in league history.
Laporta.
Now, the final layer and the final compliment of the compliment sandwich is that one of the trades I thought was very good. I actually thought that you made a really good deal and you got impressive value out of one of them. Which trade would you like to start with first?
Uh, Start with the bed.
Okay, we'll start with the Laporta for the David Njoku and 211 trade. For me, like I said, that was the one that I said was egregious.
Hmm.
To me, I understand it, right? You have Sam Laporta, you have Tucker Kraft. Do you have a third guy as well?
No, I had Laporta and Kraft.
So you just had Laporta and Kraft. I mean, when you have those two right there, you have two young guys. I like both. I mean, Laporta obviously had the really impressive breakout season as a rookie. He didn't quite, capitalize on that and launch off of that, but he was still a highly ranked tight end last year. And then you also have Tucker Kraft, who I think is emerging. I actually think that it was smart of you to look to move Laporta, knowing that you have Tucker Kraft. Even seeing what the Packers and Matt LaFleur has said, it sounds like they want to get him even more involved. And I think there's a chance that he could almost be more of the focus in that passing game over any one of their particular receivers, especially with Jaden Reed kind of being a little bit more of a hybrid and splitting touches as far as getting targets and getting some carries and everything. I think as far as being like the primary target in that passing game, I think Kraft has a really solid opportunity to step up and be sort of the star of that passing attack. So I thought it was smart to capitalize on Laporta, the value that he has, because I do think that there is a chance that he has, I don't want to say peaked because I think that he has a long career ahead of him, but I do think that what we saw, I think that we're going to see the average season for him is going to be somewhere in between his rookie year, where he scored a ton of touchdowns, he was getting a ton of targets, and it's going to be somewhere in between that and then what we saw last year, where it seems like he took a minor step back and it wasn't as dynamic as he was in that rookie season. But I feel like we might see it in the middle, but maybe a little bit closer to last season. So I think it was smart to try and get off of him and use his value. I just didn't love the value play here. And the way that I see it as Njoku, who's 28 now, is going to be 29 by the start of week one, which I don't think that that's like a huge knock. I don't think like age is like insane there, especially tight ends. They can play into their early mid 30s and everything like that. But when you look at it, you're getting a guy who, like, I'm not sure Njoku's even going to be your starting tight end. I think that Kraft has a really good argument to just be your starting tight end moving forward. And I think it's fine to tier down and get yourself a second tight end. Um, but getting the 211 on top of that, I just didn't see that as being nearly enough value to kind of make up for the difference that you're losing with Laporta. And I think that a lot of value that Laporta has, like I said, maybe he's not going to be the Trey McBride or the Brock Bowers as far as a young tight end prospect, but having that stability there for a guy at that age, in a pretty solid offense, I thought that you could have maybe gotten more on top of that if going to Njoku plus was the route that you wanted to take. I mean, Njoku, he's, like I said, going to be 29. We're not sure who his quarterback's going to be, and he is like in year 7 or 8, and he's never actually had a top five finish. Maybe by points per game, but if he's not getting there in the total points, that also speaks to the fact that he's missing some games. He's not able to put together those full seasons. So I just want to get your insight onto what went into that.
Yeah, sure. It kind of Pete had that offer on the table for quite a while. I guess he was dangling that package, 211 and Njoku and 211 and Mike Evans, which I don't think he was willing to move for Laporta. So the calculus was really, I think that with Njoku and Kraft, like I don't think I have a set starter. I don't think I have a set it and forget it guy every week. Like I think I'm going to play matchups, but when I play matchups, I think I'm going to get a top 10 performance out of one of those guys every week. So that was kind of my decision making there. 211, I'm really just banking on being able to get another piece that I can use. I'm hoping for a flex worthy piece, whether that's year one or year two, whether at running back or receiver. I think that's kind of where the depth of this draft lies. Like, I don't love the top end talent. We'll talk about that later, why I moved off 104. Um, but I like this draft like 10 to 25, say. So I think I'm going to get pretty good value there. I think I'm going to get a player that's contributing to an NFL team and a player that might have some success early in his career at uh at 211. So that's sort of what went into that. I totally get all your gripes with the move and that maybe I could have gotten more value. But at the end of the day, I think I'm still going to get top 10 tight end production. And I think I'm just going to get another depth piece for this team because overall, I think my team does lack some depth right now. I have some nice pillars, some nice core pieces, starting with Saquon and Neighbors. But after that, I think I just need to kind of have a more well-balanced roster and guys that I could feel more comfortable playing in the flex spots because I don't really feel that right now with A.D. Mitchell and Keon Coleman, Romeo Dobbs, guys like that.
Yeah, I feel that, and I think the logic makes sense. Of course, maybe it's just a difference in opinion on, what we feel you can get with that 211, and then, of course, what we feel maybe Njoku can provide. Something that we had talked about, we had texted earlier, but we wanted to save it a little bit for the show was early in the season. I think it was even before the league year officially had started, but I was reaching out to you because I was interested, and I've kind of been interested in floating him around the market a little bit with, shopping George Kittle around, and that's not a guy that I'm desperate to get off of, but I had come to you because I think you've had Laporta on the block for a while now, and that was something I was interested in because one thing that actually held me up when I was maybe floating stuff with Kittle out to you was I did feel like, and I had already given kind of my knocks on Laporta and how I see him as a year-to-year fantasy tight end, but I felt like I would have been taking a step back, and I've talked endlessly about Kittle's value, and I talked all about it when the Cucks made that trade with the Zits, and how I understand there's the difference between a wide receiver and a tight end, but you look at a guy like Terry McLaurin compared to a guy like George Kittle, where McLaurin just had one of the best years of his career, and he was barely outscoring Kittle on a week-to-week basis. But I had floated Kittle out to you, and I understand that Kittle would probably take up more value. I mean, for what it's worth, if Alex had offered me Njoku and 211 for Kittle, I think I would have smashed declined it. But the thing that I saw the value in Laporta was, like I have already said, just the fact that he's on one of the best teams in the league. He has, been a top two, top three target. And I think that's actually something that I could take away from him as well, too, is that year one, he didn't really have to compete with Jamison Williams for those targets. Jamison Williams was still coming back. He had missed his rookie year. He obviously was dealing with some suspension issues and everything like that. But I think the emergence of Jamison Williams is going to take away from Laporta for the foreseeable future, as long as Amon-Ra is that clear number one target there. And then Jamison, the one thing with tight ends and fantasies, you want a guy that is a top two target on that team. Once you get into that and you're dealing with a guy that's maybe the third target and the third option in that passing attack, it gets a little more shaky. But if a guy is going to be a top two option, and that's why Kelsey has been so good, right? Because obviously he was competing with Tyreek Hill for so long in his career, but they were throwing a million passes a game at that point. But he has always been at worst the number two behind a guy like that. And then when Tyreek Hill was out of there, he just became the number one, the clear number one. So, Laporta, I was a little worried about what he was going to give me every year, and especially as a team talking about myself that's trying to compete. I was a little iffy on making that move because I didn't know if kind of selling out and just getting rid of Kittle and not getting much more besides Laporta back, I would probably be giving up more on top of that, I would assume, just because of the age gap. I just didn't know if it was totally worth it to me, but that was something I floated out. I felt like you weren't interested in getting a tight end back at all. So what is your take on that? Like when I'm saying I definitely would have done Kittle plus, maybe a little bit more to get Laporta. How would you stack that up to your Njoku and 211 return? Was the 211 that important to what you were getting back and for everything that you've already said with just adding depth to your team?
No, I mean I think so. I think the 211 was certainly important. Um, again, I like that range, and I thought I'd be able to add a contributor for the next few years with that pick. But when we were talking about Kittle, I kind of thought I thought your idea was part of like more of a bigger package because I know you had like floated around Laporta and Chase Brown and 203 for Kittle, B. Rob, Pollard, and I think you had somebody else in there too. And so like I just wasn't willing to go that big. So I thought that was sort of your idea the entire time was to have like a bigger package like that's like 6 or 7 players plus some picks involved. And I
It's
just
just
wasn't willing to
sending
do
out
that.
feel. It's always like you got to launch something out that you maybe don't think will get accepted. That way, you open the door to a conversation. You say, "Oh well, what would you do then? What are you thinking?"
Yeah, no, totally
Part of the
fair. And
deal.
maybe maybe I didn't do a good enough shopping him like but like you said he's been on the block for a year and I could count on one hand like I don't even need one hand. Probably I've probably gotten 3 concrete offers for Laporta in the year he's been on the block. And I guess part of this too is like I just don't have like I don't value tight ends that much to be honest with you. Like I think it's all sort of the same 3 to 10. Like Laporta's obviously he's probably going to be better than Njoku, but I like Njoku plus the 211. I think that outweighs Laporta on his own. I think Bowers and McBride, certainly Bowers is in a tier of his own, and then McBride, and I think those two are clearly better than the rest of the field. And like Laporta, if you looked at flex eligible players last year, Laporta was 73rd on a total cumulative scale of his points scored throughout the year. I'm not sure what that was on a per game basis, but he was 73rd in total amount of points scored last year for flex eligible players. And I think there's a decent chance that I am able to draft, a player that's kind of comparable. So I have a player that can be flexed and also have Njoku and Kraft kind of vying for those top 10 weeks at tight end.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. And that's kind of the thing too, just talking about Kittle and everything I was saying, where even still I was a little hesitant to give him up was because obviously he doesn't have the age that a guy like Bowers or McBride has, but he's still so good for as long as he's gonna be that it almost feels like I'm stuck just like riding him until the end. And like I don't even want to say it like that. That sounds like negative about it. But it's like if as long as I'm trying to win, it almost doesn't make sense for me to like tear down a tight end because he has given such an advantage at the position that it does make it tough to evaluate because it's like, yeah, like, okay, there is the value in getting a little bit younger and sort of setting myself up from a dynasty perspective. But also, if I feel like Kittle can give me three, four more elite to at least good, very good seasons, then it makes it very hard to kind of part ways with them. So that does kind of make things difficult. And, to what you were saying about only getting a handful of, concrete offers, despite how long you've had them on there, George always says to give him credit. It's always once the trade's made that all of a sudden everybody comes out of the woodwork and says, I would have done this, I would have done that. It's like, all right, where was that energy when I was actively shopping the guy? So, yeah, I can't blame you if that's how you feel about tight ends and everything. And then, you kind of see it and you can look ahead and you can see that board. And I do agree with you that I do think there's a lot of value. And, maybe it's not elite dynasty players, but at least guys that you feel like can contribute. I do feel like it's sort of like a bell curve in terms of what you can get in that mid to late second round at cost. And I think does make that 211 a little more interesting than maybe in years past. I mean, even speaking to old drafts, I was looking back at the draft when Bowen took Kenny Pickett and he took him 10th overall. And I was like, because obviously that was like a miss of a pick, but Bowen was able to turn that into Brock Purdy, and then he won a championship that same season. But I went back to the draft because I was like, well, who could he have actually taken after that? And when you look at it, right, it was like a stretch of 9. Like I think almost all of them are pretty solid to elite players in Dynasty right now. The pick right after Pickett was George Pickens, so I'm sure if Bowen could go back and do that, maybe he'd want to go Pickens, but at the same time, knowing what we know with how he traded it for Purdy, he probably wouldn't take that back. But then it's like a stretch of 15 picks of basically worthless dynasty players. But that was also a pretty weak draft. There weren't really any quarterbacks in that draft. That was a Malik Willis draft, infamously. But yeah, I do think that this is a much stronger draft in the middle of that second round to maybe the middle of that third round at cost. So, all right, moving on to the second trade. I actually think that you got really good value here. And again, like I said, anything can happen to these players. I mean, Bowen could use that fourth pick to pick a guy that ends up becoming the next Saquon Barkley, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh well, maybe I should have just done that. But I think for where your team's at, And there definitely are some questions with your running backs. I mean, we've seen that the Bengals are hosting running backs on visits. We've seen that, who knows with a guy like Tyrone Tracy, right? He was I believe he was a fifth round pick, but he was day three regardless. He's kind of on like a shitty team that's, going through it right now. You just never know with guys like that how they will last, right? So going out and getting a blue chip guy like Saquon Barkley, I think was a great move for you. And I just think that like on its face, I mean, I just think that you got unbelievable value. I mean, you get a guy that's immediately going to contribute. Even if that 1-4 ends up being like a really good running back, it's going to be tough to bring to the table what a guy like Saquon Barkley brings, right? Like there are like those guys that could be anywhere from RB5 to RB15 on the yearly rankings. And then there were the guys that put up 2,000 yards and have 20 total touchdowns and do that. And, sure, it's tough to be, it almost never happens that a guy is RB1 and then repeats as RB1. And, I think it's fair to assume that Barkley has maybe peaked in terms of, his best season ever. But I still think that if you get 80% of what Saquon was last year, that's still going to be one of the best running backs in the league. And I still think that in this rushing attack, we haven't seen a guy with this talent in this style offense with the opportunities that he's getting. We haven't really seen that too much. I mean, we saw a guy like Todd Gurley who was getting infinite touches, and I feel like this is sort of he has the potential to go on a similar run to Todd Gurley that he went on for his first few years in the league. So in terms of Bowen's return, I like it. I get it for him, right? He gets the fourth pick in the first round. He also gets that would be the 16th overall pick. He gets
Yeah.
younger. I just feel like he was maybe a little overly eager to get rid of Saquon Barkley. I just don't know if it was worth it for a guy in his spot to make that trade right now. I think that maybe he could have waited a little bit longer. I feel like there had to be a better deal on the market for him. I mean, he was asking when I was doing my cake stream the other day, I think it was like 1-8, James Cook, and then chat. I don't know if you can help me out with who else was in that. But I feel like, I didn't really love that deal, but I feel like that was almost maybe slightly, yeah, I feel like it was pretty close. So I understand that there's like the excitement of getting that rookie, but just the fact that it sounds like McMorrow's going to be going running back, and receiver in those first three, or running back, quarterback in those first three. He sent me his mock draft. I think that he's totally off base with his strategy in it, but I still think that he's going two running backs regardless in those first three. So trading Saquon Barkley just to get the third running back in that draft, and then getting a second rounder as well, which is kind of just on the outside looking in at what I think is more of the top tier of those prospects. I just didn't love the return. I feel like if you're going to trade a guy like Saquon Barkley, I feel like you're going to get more of a king's ransom than he might have gotten. But at the same time, I do understand his perspective, and I like this running back class a lot. We can dive into that. I'm assuming he's going to take running back. I will say McMorrow thinks that he's going to take Tyler Warren at that fourth spot, and I know that Bowen wants to get a tight end, and he's not happy with Kincaid right now. He feels like he can upgrade there, but I Bowen's got Jacobs, he's got Monty, and then I think Trey Benson's is next up. I think Bowen has to go running back, especially in this class. So McMorrow sent me his mock. I don't know if he was trying to like throw me off the scent and like fuck me up and make me like fuck my own mock drafts up, but it was maybe the most off base mock draft I've ever seen for a guy that has all these picks, especially when I've been going on these live streams and doing my strategy. So yeah, maybe pull back the curtain a little bit on that trade and tell us how you're feeling. And kind of, I would assume that the goal was just to go out and get a blue chip player. There aren't many players in the league like Saquon Barkley. You went out and you got him, and you kind of added to what was maybe a little more of a shaky running back room going into the season than you might have hoped for.
Yeah, so I think I definitely needed that. Like I had mentioned, like my pillar players, I really only think I had one. Like I feel comfortable with Baker as my quarterback one. But other than that, I really only felt like super confident in Neighbors as my wide receiver one. And like just to circle back, like I know you mentioned something in the league chat about trading Laporta and trading a top three tight end. Like I only did that really because it was a top three tight end. Like if I had Neighbors who I view as a top three dynasty receiver, like I'm not moving Malik
Yeah.
Neighbors for anything. So I think that it's just positional value really was the crux of that, I think. But the Saquon deal, I've been talking to Bowen for 2 months now, and he sent me a lot of offers. I've sent some counters, and we've been talking. It's mostly around Josh Jacobs, um, but I held out a little bit, and then he offered that one, and we were able to come to an agreement. And I think it's important view both of the trades from my perspective as like a joint trade, as if I got everything all at once. So I'm trading 101 and 104, and I traded 101 and 104 in Laporta, and I got back Saquon, who I think will be a top three running back for the next couple of years. I got Njoku again, who I think I can kind of mix and match and play the matchups game with Njoku and Kraft. And then I was able to get, 411, which is a total dart throw, but able to get 211. So I still have three second round picks, and I still have five picks in the top three rounds. So I think that's important for me as well to kind of build out the rest of my roster. So I just think it's important to kind of view. I know everyone in the league, not every. I'm the only one that was involved in both trades. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think everyone's going to look at it and judge both trades individually. That's perfectly fine. But I think you need to judge them jointly and see like that entire trade, what I gave up and what I got in return between the two. But I'm happy to have Saquon. I feel super confident in my RB1 and my wide receiver one now. I think Saquon, like, he is 28 years old. He's been in the league for a while. If he was on any other team, I don't know that I would have made this trade, honestly. Like, even if he had the 2,000 yards and he was still with the Giants or he was somewhere else, I don't know if I would have made the deal. But for him, I think he's going to age nicely in this offense. Like, the infrastructure is just perfect around him. He's going to stay in that same scheme with Sirianni. They're always going to be a run-heavy team. You got a running quarterback, so you can't really key on him. You have the best receiver duo in the league, so you can't load the box. I just think it's a truly perfect situation for him. So I expect top five production for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I agree. And I've talked about it on a few streams now where I feel like that age cliff for running backs is going to start to push up just a little bit more. Just with the training and the technology that we have, I think guys are a lot more conscious of taking care of their bodies now. And I think Saquon is kind of in. I've talked about how Derrick Henry, I feel like, could honestly play until he's 40 because he's just a freak like that. I think Saquon falls into the same category. I know that Saquon's dealt with some, more serious injuries than Derrick Henry ever has, but I just think that he's in the perfect situation. He seems almost rejuvenated going from the New York Giants, which had absolutely no hope as a franchise at all, to now the Eagles and winning a Super Bowl in his first year and doing all that. And then, of course, they've also taken care of him with, restructuring and extending his contract and everything. So, yeah, and I also think that it's worth considering. I mean, if the tush push does get banned, I think that could result in more carries for him, especially on the 1 or 2 yard line. So I do think that that is something to consider. And just, to touch back on it, like I was saying, I don't think that Bowen got a bad return. I think it's just like, he got two picks back. He didn't get like a player back or anything. I do really like these running backs, and I think that even, the RB3 in this class could be the RB1 in most running back classes to begin with. It's more just, yeah, I feel like it's one of those you're almost trading. It's the Peter Griffin. That pick could be anything. It could even be Saquon Barkley, that type of thing. So that was like my only knock on Bowen's side of the trade. But at the same time, he's getting younger. He got another pick that I think can still be a really good player with that second rounder. So, I think it's interesting. I just feel like coming off the season Saquon had, if you're going to cash in on a player like that, I just feel like he didn't really cash in. I feel like he made too even of a trade for a guy considering what he was giving up. But all right, moving on. And this is a big reason I wanted to have both of you guys on for this because I feel like all three of us were always talking Pats shit, what we want the Pats to do. Or I'm always talking the Patriots separately with each of you guys. I also feel like the three of us bring three different perspectives when it comes to the Patriots and kind of how they're going about this rebuild and the coaching hire and the free agent signings and now the draft. I mostly just want to focus on the draft right now, with it coming up being only 2 weeks away. We do have the fourth pick. It's sounding more and more like Travis Hunter. And it's coming from Schefter, who I don't think Schefter really knows shit when it comes to the draft like that. Simcoe put it best where he said Schefter is good at getting scoops that are sent directly to him. He's not really good when it comes to the rumors or the projections or anything like that. He's really just an errand boy for some of these franchises. I think one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen was when his email to Dan Snyder got leaked, and he was like, how does this look, boss? Like that was like, okay, you are an absolute puppet in this league. But yeah, I do become with every each passing day, I become more and more pessimistic about our odds at getting either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. I think a lot of people are starting to think that it's looking like we're going to maybe stick and pick with Will Campbell. I think, a lot of people are saying, well, why don't we try and trade back a few spots? Of course, that's always easier said than done. I've now seen a lot of rumors going around, or maybe a lot of speculation that we're going to be going after. And help me with the kid's name. I'm now blanking on it. Who's the Georgia linebacker that now everybody's talking about?
Jalen
Jalen
Walker.
Walker.
Jalen Walker. I'll say it. I mean, of course, I do not want us to pick him at 4, but as exciting as it would be to get, and of course, if they are there for us, I would love to get Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. I think that those are blue chip guys. Those are face of the franchise guys. If they're not going to be there, I mean, I'm very much in favor of trading back a fairly significant amount if that means we are going to go into next year's draft with our first round pick as well as somebody else's first round pick. And hopefully it's kind of a more shitty team's first round pick. I just think from a roster building standpoint, I actually think that that is the right way to go about it. It's tough to be patient, especially as a Pats fan when we had 2 decades of success and then we're now in year, what, 3 or 4 of kind of being dog shit. It's tough. And, I kind of laugh at my Jets fans, that I'm friends with, where it's like, I don't know how you guys have done this for your entire life because I'm, going into like year 4 or 5 and I am ready to get out. Like I am done with being bad. I'm done with not making the playoffs. We used to be able to pencil ourselves into the AFC Conference Championship. Now we're not even, now we can't even tank correctly. We can't even get the first pick when we're like the worst team. But I kind of like the idea of going back and getting a guy like that. I mean, we've seen Philly go all in on drafting these Georgia defenders, and of course that has worked very well for them. But of course, I would have to see what the trade would actually be. Like, I mean, if we just traded back to like 5 when we got like a third round pick or something, then no, I don't want to do that. But I think that if we were to trade back a significant amount, get a type of return like we've seen. Who was it? I mean, the Bears did it, the Lions did it, having 2 firsts going into another draft. If we can get like another day 2 pick out of that as well, I actually think that that's a fairly smart way to go about things. I also really like getting Will Campbell. Frank, I know you're not crazy about him, but at the same time, like I know you also
I've come around a bit.
yeah, I know, yeah. One, you've come around. I know you never even you never hated the kid either. But another thing that I really like about him is like he's easy to root for. I mean, the only knock on him is that he's got short arms, right? And that was like never an issue with him during the season. Then all of a sudden, it's start picking apart all these prospects. You get a little prospect fatigue, and now everybody's like really driving that point home. I mean, my take on it is like maybe okay, you don't use a top pick like that on a guard, but if you're telling me that his floor is being like a perennial Pro Bowl guard, and he's almost like a lock for that at the very worst, then it's like, shit. I mean, maybe it's worth taking. It's kind of like the age-old discussion, right? If you were to draft a quarterback and you knew that he'd be Philip Rivers, like you knew that that would be his skill level for his whole career, how high would you take him? All that type of stuff. So, I am interested, and I'd be very much okay with taking him at 4, assuming that Carter and Hunter aren't there. But Frank, I'll kick it to you just because we haven't really heard from you at all on this call yet, and I know that you're always thinking about our different options and running our scenarios. What do you think? And let's assume that Carter and Hunter aren't going to be available. What would you say is the ideal way for us to go about this draft?
I mean, I'd probably say trade back too, but from what I've heard, I'm kind of worried that the the return you'd get wouldn't be anywhere near what it was the last couple of years. Because there's really no second quarterback that people are clamoring over. The blue chip guys will be off the board. There's a couple players that I feel like people might really want to trade up for, but like you might only get like an extra second or an extra third.
Yeah, I feel that, and especially like in this draft, while I do think, and I'll get more into it when we go through our rankings, but while I do think there are a lot of solid guys, it's a lot of solid guys where I can see the vision on them maybe going on to become, stars in this league, not necessarily superstars, but really good players in this league. But I'm also not going to hold my breath and count on it happening. So like there are a lot of guys that I like. I like their traits. I like what they can become. I like what their best possible outcome is, but I also don't feel like they're necessarily game breakers. So I'm not crazy about just getting a guy or, trading back and then just getting like a second rounder or like, another good third round pick or something if that's all that we're going to get on top of that. Like I'm really only interested in trading back if we were to get another first round pick or something really significant in return, maybe like a really good veteran player or something like that. Amaral, how do you feel about that 4th pick? And I'll kind of toss the same question to you. Assuming that Carter and Hunter aren't going to be there for us at 4, how would you like to see us play?
I want Campbell. I've been on Campbell the entire time. Like I get the arm length and I get that nobody's ever succeeded at tackle at that level, or at least in the last 25, 30 years with that arm length. S-
The
I don't think it
wingspan
matters.
too.
The wingspan too, right? So I think they just need five able bodies in front of Drake May to keep him off his ass. So I would go Will Campbell. Again, worst case, you make him the left guard, and like I'm totally cool with that. Like I get that that's kind of shitty to take a guard at 4 overall, but it is what it is. It's not the greatest draft anyway. It's not like we're sitting here with last year's draft class and there's Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and even Roma Dunze. Like these guys just don't exist. Those pass catchers don't exist in this draft. So to me, I think they got to focus on the offensive line now. Maybe add some skill on day 2, but I think they have to address the offensive line for sure because the left side of the line is still a shit show. Like the right side, I feel fine with Onwenu and Morgan Moses. Like I think that's fine, but even center, left guard, left tackle, total shit show. Question marks everywhere. So they just really need to address that. Like we're in April now, and they still need three. They need 60% of a line. So I don't love that for Drake May at all. So I think offensive line needs to be addressed on day 1. I would like to see a trade down too. Like I think ideally you do get a trade down and you take a guy like Josh Simmons who would be the
I
number one
love
tackle in
Josh
the draft.
Yeah, I
Simmons.
was gonna say, Frank, that's the guy that
Yeah.
you love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I and it's crazy to me. He's like supposedly dropping into the 20s for a lot of people's drafts, which kind of blows
Yeah.
my
So
mind.
like I think just like value wise, it'd be tough to sell that, taking him at number 4 overall, coming off the knee injury. But like if you could trade down to it seems like the Saints are sort of horny for Shador. It seems like, right? They're the betting favorites now, I believe. So if they moved up from 9 to 4, I think I'd even be comfortable taking Simmons at 9, to be honest with you. Like I think he's going to be the best tackle in this draft.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree with that. That it probably wouldn't work out, but you could almost finesse it where you'd take somebody like Tet at 9 and then trade back up for Simmons with the extra pick. But
Hmm.
it's threading the needle too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those where on paper you can definitely see how it happens, but it's like, yeah, on draft night, especially with the 10-minute clock, all that stuff, so many moving parts, it's tough to see. And kind of tell what both of you guys have said, where there isn't really that second quarterback. It's not that low, that top heavy of a draft. It really is one of those things where it's like the only way for us to get a ton of value trading back from that 4th pick is if Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter were to fall to us. But then all of a sudden it's like, well, shit, if they're there, I kind of want to take them. So
Yeah.
it's sort of a, I don't know, would that be like a Sophie's choice or something like that? I don't know how these terms work, but yeah, it makes it tough. But yeah, like if there is a team that's desperate to do it, then it's like, fuck yeah, especially if it is a team like the Saints, they want to trade up and they want to take Shador. Be my guest. I mean, go right ahead and do it. One question I did have, about the Will Campbell stuff is I understand, and I've kind of posed this question on Twitter before. And Frank, I don't know if maybe you'd have an answer for it, but I understand all the stuff where, with the wingspan and the arm length, there really isn't much of a track record for success there. But how many of those guys actually were like the level of prospect that Will Campbell is? So it's like how many guys are as athletic as he is? How many guys have the resume in the SEC that he has? Like who are we necessarily comparing him to? When we're talking about that stuff. Do you know?
Honestly, I don't know specifics, but it's probably not very many. I mean, his athletic profile is ridiculous. He's been a starter since he was a freshman. His arm length really isn't even that bad either. It pretty much does hit the 33 inch. I think they were measuring a little off at the combine. It seemed like
Well, yeah,
everybody
wasn't he longer at his pro day? And of course, you can always take that with a grain of salt as well. But
well, but
um,
yeah, but he got measured in the past at like 32 and 7/8. So I
yeah.
think he's
Yeah.
closer to 33 than he is 32 and a half.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, where it's like if he was at like 33 on the dot, like yeah, it would still be, on like the lower percentile, but all of a sudden so many of these people on Twitter would just see that number and then be like, "Oh, no, he's fine." And all of a sudden like all their complaints would go away where it's like, if like the next day he woke up and he was a little tight and like all of a sudden, he doesn't get the same extension on his measurement, he could have a totally different number. So, yeah, I do think that it's like if we were to try and predict a guy being an outlier, I feel like he would be the one just because of, like we said, his athletic profile and then just the fact that, like, we can look at the tape and, of course, when you break it down, like, he's not perfect and, like, you can find clips of him getting beat, on certain reps and everything. But, he's still a kid, he's still all that stuff. And I will say, in terms of our O line as it is, I mean, like you said, Amaral, I like that right side. I think that Moses, it sounds like he's going to bring some culture to that room. And I'm not, I'm talking about team culture. I'm not talking about anything beyond that. But I also do think that Bradbury, I understand that he was not great as a center for the Vikings, but that offensive line was like also just not great as a whole. And I kind of broke that down when I was talking about the Darnold trade because yeah, like, when you look at certain stats, it's like, oh, wow, the Vikings O line was way better than the Seahawks. But then when you kind of dive into it and you especially look at how they finished the season, they were pretty bad themselves. And I do think that there is a component to it where it's like if he's just like surrounded by shit, it's easy to kind of sink down and play to that competition where, if he's kind of maybe, playing next to some better guys and, if we bring in at least one really good guy on the left side and then we have two guys that we like on the right side, that could help him maybe piece things together and figure some things out. And also maybe just a change of scenery is all a guy needed. I mean, he is a former first round pick. I know there's the joke that once you got to break that out, that means that they probably fucking suck, yeah, I'm willing to give him a shot. And I think just first of all, he is an upgrade from what we've had. I mean, not from David Andrews, but the fact that once Andrews went down, I don't even remember who was taking over and then all of a sudden Strange was trying
I
it
think it
out
was
and
Ben Brown, and then it was
yeah, and it's like,
Strange.
maybe Cole Strange can be a guy that's like waiting in the wings and finds his spot. I mean, I would like to find a role for him and have him figure it out because we did use a pretty good pick on him. And, I would like to see guys on our team play well. So hopefully he can figure something out as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm willing to give him a shot and kind of give him the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe once we surround him with some good pieces, all of a sudden Bradbury can kind of mold into what he was maybe expected to be on draft night. And I'm not sure. I mean, maybe he started out strong and then has kind of fallen off in recent years.
I
But
completely forgot about Bradbury, to be honest with you. When I was just like running through the offensive line in my head. I don't think he's going to be great, but I feel like he could be serviceable. Like I think he could be
yeah, I
a
mean, he's
just
just a
like
huge improvement over what we had because we had
yeah.
shit. You know.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah,
also like I think the only player that I remember or only tackle that I remember with the arm length being that short was Rashawn Slater, and he turned out to be a pretty fucking good player. So
Yeah.
because I think I
but
just
he
pulled
had
it up.
like a
His
normal wingspan though. It's tough to find somebody with the combination of the wingspan and the arm length.
That's fair. That's a good point. That's totally fair. But like, yeah, Kieran, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. Like the guy was a very good tackle in the SEC. It's not like he's playing in the fucking MAC. Like the
Yeah.
he's a good player.
Where did Cole
Yeah,
Strange come from? Where did we draft him out of?
Chattanooga.
Yeah, see, it's like, when you're getting into the weeds like that for a first round offensive lineman, then it's like, oh shit. Like, and I know, Belichick has found his diamonds in the rough. I mean, Kyle Duggar, of course. That was the guy that George and I argued a bunch about. And because I'm a big wait and see guy, and George was like so pissed that night or that day that we took Duggar in the second round. I'm like, I don't know. I kind of trust Belichick and his instincts when it comes to a defensive player like that. And of course, Duggar wasn't great last year. I think he was playing hurt, but for the most part, we've gotten a pretty good return on investment on that pick. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like when Belichick's kind of reaching for offensive guys, it hasn't worked out too great for us. But speaking of offensive guys, and one thing is to kind of touch on what you guys were saying about Josh Simmons and how we can maybe go about getting him. I would like to see us maybe get aggressive and try and snipe a guy using our second round pick and trying to trade back in. But at the same time, I think that there are some interesting day two picks. One thing I do want to ask is like, what are you guys thinking about receiver? And you can kind of tip your hand a little bit if you want to when it comes to the receiver rankings. But I was talking about this with Bowen and Simcoe, and I was saying when you look at our receiver room right now, right, we have Diggs, we have Pop Douglas, we have Mac Hollins. I'd say those guys are absolute locks. And of course, there is the question of when will Diggs be ready, so maybe we can have an extra roster spot, for the first couple weeks of the season. I think Diggs is a grinder. I think he's going to find a way to be playing on week one. But that's three guys right there, and then you got to
Polk's
factor
a
in we
lock.
got.
I think Polk's a lock.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and I should say I was
second
going to
round
include him in the
pick.
next group. I think that he is a lock
Yeah.
just because of the capital that we used on him. Kayshawn Booty, he was out. for a large chunk of that second half of the season, he was our best receiver. Once Drake May took over, he actually had the most receiving yards on our team. I'd say that he's safe as far as making the roster. I mean, maybe we trade him or something. But I don't think that he should be in danger of getting cut. I saw a lot of people on Pat's Twitter talking about that. Who am I
Yeah,
missing? There's
those are
obviously Javon
surprising.
Baker. There's Kendrick Bourne, who I think that's a good veteran presence. He did have his best season of his career with Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. He had 800 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. All of a sudden, we're looking at 6, 7 guys right there. That is a pretty full room. And I understand that it's like, if we see a way to get better at receiver, almost none of those guys should stop us from doing that. But that's going to force us to make some tough decisions on what we're going to do. I mean, maybe Bourne ends up being like a surprise cut candidate. Maybe we can trade him and trade him to like San Francisco and get like a random pick or something like that to help clear some space. But it is tough. Like there's not really an open spot. Even if you want to factor in Javon Baker, I mean, I still think that puts us at 7 right there. That's a pretty full room. And I know a lot of guys they don't want to give up on Baker. I don't want to give up on Baker either, for the record. I feel like I've kind of come across on social media as a Baker hater. I ranked Baker pretty damn high, almost embarrassingly high last year. I had him and
Same.
Polk.
I had him embarrassingly high
Yeah,
too.
I had him and Polk as like my wide receiver, like 10 and 11 last year, which I mean, I know that that's not like a first round grade or something, but that was much higher than consensus, on a guy like Javon Baker. So I was pumped when we got him. So, like, I don't want to come across as a hater of the guy, but at the same time, when I see people being like, oh, yeah, we should, maybe, Booty is like a sneaky cut candidate and, like, we got to give Baker a chance. It's like, well, hold on. I mean, come on. Let's be a little realistic here. Let's be honest about like, what happened to the kid. And by all accounts, it sounded like he was great in like OTAs and stuff. But then everybody says once the pads went on, he kind of lost it. He kind of lost his edge. I think he was maybe dealing with some off the field stuff as well that we didn't maybe see on like the front page of the Standard Times or something. So I'm not
He had
giving
a
up
lot
on
of
him.
trouble learning the playbook too, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like there are a lot of factors there, and it sounds like he's been, I don't know how much I buy the whole thing. Like, oh yeah, he's got a great relationship with Mike Vrabel. It's like, I mean, what did he like see him at his press conference or something? Like, how much have they really been hanging out and like talking football and stuff like that? But yeah, and as I'm saying, it is a very full wide receiver room where if we do bring in more bodies, that's just going to make things really tough to make decisions, and somebody's going to kind of get their feelings hurt there. So, how are we feeling with that day two stuff? As far as there are a lot of interesting wide receivers there. Are there guys like do we feel like we don't? And maybe we don't even have to necessarily name names here, but do we feel like we should be going after a wide receiver on day two with with our second and third round picks? Amaral, what do you think?
100%. So yeah, I think we're kind of a lockstep there with 5 locks, like Bourne and Baker, totally cool with moving on with both of those guys. I don't think you need the veteran presence of Bourne. Like you have that with Diggs and Hollins. I think that's
I think
fine.
that's a
I'm
fair
good
that's a
with
very
that.
fair point. Yeah,
So I think they have to. You need to get him another game-breaking weapon. Like I think obviously Diggs is going to be an enormous upgrade. Um, but they definitely need something else. They need another guy that can play on the outside. Like I think Douglas was sort of overrated by most Patriots fans after his rookie year. Like
I
I'm
agree
still
with
not
that.
entirely sure what Pop Douglas is. Like I think he's a fine player.
To me, he's kind
Um
of like a better Wandale Robinson, where he's going to get open in the short yardage. He's not really a great yak guy at all. It's
mhm.
just one of those things where it's like, what is really his ceiling? Like, I think that he is a great player considering where we got him at, where we got him from. Right, he kind of like came from out of nowhere and everything. But it's like when we're really talking about putting a team together, it's like, are we really gonna like marry ourselves to Pop Douglas? Like maybe on like a really good passing attack, he could become like a gotta have it receiver, kind of like how Hunter Renfrow was for the Raiders, where it's like, like they had like the third and Renfrow, all that. It's like, hey, we just need you to get to the chain, catch this ball, fall down, and get us that first down when we absolutely need it. Like maybe he could be that guy for us, but I absolutely do not feel like Pop Douglas is like our wide receiver of the future as far as, like leading our passing attack.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I think they have to, and I think it has to be on day two. So I think to me, unless so just to backtrack for a second, looks like Ward's going one and Hunter's going two from everything I
Yeah.
can find on the internet.
Yeah, as
So
far as
those
we
two are
know,
going
I
two.
feel like that's kind of what we have to operate under that
Yeah,
that
they
assumption.
took Hunter's odds off of DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all by that. But what I find surprising is that a lot of people have Carter getting past the Giants, which I guess makes some sense if you think about it when they have Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns.
Yeah.
Like I don't think you can ever have too many edge guys, but I thought it was interesting that a lot of mocks recently have had Carter slipping to 4 or even beyond the Patriots. So I would reverse course there and backtrack on everything I just said about Will Campbell. If Abdul Carter's there at 4, I think you have to take him. I think you need a game wrecker on the defensive side. So I would take Abdul Carter at 4 and then I guess try to trade back into the first round and get the tackle and then still try to address the skill guys on day 2. But assuming Carter's gone, assuming Carter goes in the top 3, I think they go have to go offensive line in round 1 and then get skill players on day 2. I think they could really use a receiver. I don't think a tight end's like out of the question.
Yeah.
Like it's a decent room right now, but Hooper and Henry could both be in their final year here. So I think they just have to add skill. I think it's going to be really offense heavy on days 1 and 2 for them, just based on where they're at roster wise, especially after the free agency moves that they made.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, part of it too, I mean, I'm really big on this running back class. And like, I mean, I'll say it, like, I think that we need to get a piece of this running back class. And I don't want to wait until day 3 to do that unless it really shakes out and it's like, holy shit, I can't believe these guys are falling all the way like down there. But I mean, do we have 2 third round picks now?
Yeah.
Yes,
So we have
the
two
Judon
third round
trade.
picks now. I
Yeah.
feel like that would be a prime spot to pick somebody up. I'm not in love with Ramondre Stevenson. I think that he's a fine running back. I think that when he's playing at his best, he can be very good. I just feel like we've never really seen him put together a complete season. And I also kind of like what I was saying where, maybe you don't necessarily how we have like a full wide receiver room. I just feel like, but that shouldn't stop us from improving if we see an opportunity to improve. That's kind of how I feel about our running back room as well. Where it's like I understand that we have Ramondre, we signed him to that contract, he's got a couple years left, but I also don't think that he's good enough to stop us and be like, you know what, we're all set. I mean, we've seen how some of these we look back at some of these running back classes, and I always conflate, all these running backs, so I'm not even going to try and name the classes, but there's like 2 or 3 in the past like 15 years that have been like pretty stacked where it's like, holy shit, like all these guys are going. This guy went in the 3rd round. I just feel like this is an opportunity for us to grab a piece, a guy that doesn't have to step in and be our starting running back right away, but he can start working in and splitting touches and everything, almost like what the Jets did with Brees Hall and Braylon Allen, where it's like that's a really good running back with a lot of good potential. And Allen's more of a unique case because he was coming in as like a 19-year-old rookie. But just bringing a guy in where it's like he could eventually take over, or that could give us a pretty solid two-headed attack. And I do feel like that's still the move in this league. I think a lot of teams are still trying to shift towards that, and just have a powerful rushing attack where it's nonstop. I mean, we're even seeing it in Carolina where they went out and they got Rico Dowdle, who he's not like a top tier stud, but it's almost more of the same with what they have with Chuba Hubbard, and they like what they have with Chuba Hubbard. So it's like, yeah, when he needs to get off and catch his breath or something, they can just put in Rico Dowdle, and it's almost like, if you're not getting 100% of Chuba, you're maybe getting 80, 90% of him. And it's like, yeah, you can't just relax because they're starting running backs off the field. So I think that with how stacked this running back class is, I think it's worth taking a look, especially because we have those 2 third rounders, even if that means you got to be aggressive and try and go out and snipe one of your guys. Frank, what would you like to see us do with our day 2 picks?
I wouldn't mind running back. Like Scatabo or like Dylan Sampson would be pretty solid with either of those picks. Um, but it depends. Like if we don't get Abdul Carter, I'd kind of like to see us use one of our 3rd round picks on Josiah Stewart.
Shout
Um,
out Everett.
what's up?
Is that an
I said
MIA
shout out
guy?
Everett Mass.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
he is.
I like Wyatt Millum too. Like he could slide in as like left guard, and I think be immediately like a really good contributor. Um, Kyle Williams is another name. I really like him.
Yeah,
He's
he's been getting
probably
a
going to
lot of
be around
steam
in the
too.
3rd round.
What was it? What did he just like put on a show at the Senior Bowl? I feel like that's what I've been seeing, where it's like all of a sudden he's shooting to the top. I think Chris Sims had him as his like wide receiver 2 in this class.
Yeah, he
But
went crazy.
yeah, I mean that's I mean I like him. I was watching him, and that's one of those guys where it's like I knew who he was. And I think that was because I watched, a decent amount of Cam Ward when he was at Washington State. But then when Cam Ward leaves that, I'm not watching Washington State anymore. And all of a sudden I kind of forget who the kid is. And then I'm like, oh shit, he was pretty damn good. So yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. And like, I definitely do think that we need to just look to add like a skill position guy. And then, like you said, Amaral, if Abdul Carter's there at 4, then yeah, just kind of forget everything I've said. Like, I would like to just take him. But at the same time, hey, maybe that opens up an opportunity for us to get just like a crazy return. But I don't know. I also I'm nervous, especially after what we did, right? Trading away the pick that became Lad McConkey and taking Jalen Polk. I'm almost like nervous about having a guy with that type of talent just like be the guy that we traded away on draft day and it coming back to bite us in the ass. Last year was bad enough with all that stuff. But all right. I feel like that kind of wraps up all the interesting stuff. I don't want to get too in the weeds with like day 3 picks or anything like that. I don't have too heavy an opinion. And anything that we do have, I will say there is a quarterback that I would love to talk about in a little bit that I would hope is there for us on day 3. And I'd love for him to come in and maybe be Drake May's sort of developmental backup. But we can talk about that in 2 seconds. Let me share my screen now and pull up these rankings. All right. You guys can see them?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right. Let's start with quarterback. Yeah, so like I said to you guys before the show, I don't want to just. I feel like it would just be boring as fuck if we just talked about 40 players, going through this, or I guess even more than that. So I want to maybe highlight some guys that I feel like are ranked a little bit higher or lower than to consensus compared to the others, or anything like that. So some guys I want to start with. Amaral, I'll go with you. I want to start. Have you start with Shadur Sanders? You have him at 2. Frank and I have him at 4 and 5. I will say just to break down my tiers. So Cam Ward, that's QB1. I mean, first of all, he's just locked in as the first overall pick. I'd say it would be an absolute shock. I don't know if it's going to be the Titans. I've said it before. I'm not totally sold on the Titans actually going quarterback at 1. I wouldn't be surprised if they did trade off of that. But at the same time, he is still locked in as that first overall pick. That's the guy where it's like I just feel like you got to take him. He's QB1. He's going to have the most opportunity. I think he has probably the most solid floor of the players in this draft. I'm not totally sold on his ceiling. I don't think that there's really a high end guy that I could lock in. I should say high end floor. But of course, like the ceiling on a lot of these guys can be, as high as they want it to be. But Ward, like compared to other quarterbacks in the past few drafts that we've seen, I wouldn't rank him necessarily above a bunch of those. But I still like him as the quarterback 1, so I'm locking him in as kind of like the safe pick at the very top. Milrow and Howard, and I'll get into Howard in a second. Those are guys where I kind of see the archetype with them, and I see them. They can run. I think that they can throw if they can really like turn their focus to that, and they can become a little bit more of a consistent passer. I think that they have an opportunity to actually morph into really good starting quarterbacks, and if they can get a starting job and hold on to that, I think they can be pretty damn good fantasy quarterbacks. Sanders and Dart in this next tier for me, those are guys where I see it. Maybe they have, a solid floor, but I'm not totally sold on their ceilings. That next tier for me are guys where, these feel like guys that are just going to like get a backup opportunity, maybe come in and get a few starts and see what they can do with it. And then the other 2 guys at the bottom, they're just kind of like a B tier of that tier above it. So I just want to start with you, Amaral, talk about Shadur. It's not like you have him insanely high compared to me and Frank. I actually think Frank and I are the ones that are going against consensus, of course, because it feels like Shadur is going to be that quarterback 2 in the draft. But what do you like so much about him that you have him not only 2, but you have him in a tier with Cam Ward?
I wouldn't say that I'm like in love with him as a prospect. I don't think this quarterback class is very good. Like it's one of the worst in recent memory. It's better. What was that pick? It was what 2022. It's like
Yeah.
definitely better than that. Like that was complete dog shit. But this is not anywhere close to like. I mean, last year was the outlier on the other end of it, where they were 6 taken in the top 12. But I just don't love the class as a whole. And I've kind of viewed Ward and Sanders as pretty similarly throughout the year. I give the edge to Ward because he has that rushing upside. It's like it's like so wild to like I work with a bunch of people that don't watch college football. I try to explain Shadur, and I'm like, yes, it's Deion's son, but he's not athletic. And they're like, how the fuck does that make sense? But the accuracy, the toughness, he's played behind an awful offensive line. Now he's had good skill players, obviously, led by Hunter, but I'm just a believer in him. He's been doubted. Like nobody really thought he was gonna have a smooth transition from Jackson State to Colorado. Proved people wrong. Then came back, had an even better second year at Colorado. So I'm a Shedeur guy. I don't think he's gonna be this elite level NFL prospect or NFL quarterback, but I think he's gonna be a starting quarterback in this league for quite a while.
Yeah, and I think a comp to a guy like Jared Goff is honestly pretty fair, just because one, like they are sort of like and I think he's a little more athletic than a guy like Jared Goff. Jared Goff's very slow, but just as far as being like a pocket passer, Shedeur, he brings accuracy. He doesn't turn the ball over, and we've seen when Goff gets into a really good system with some really good players around him, he can put up some crazy seasons. So I do agree with you on the fact that like I think Shedeur, he's going to get a million opportunities, and it almost feels like he's sort of too big to fail because he is Dion's son, and it's like how is Dion going to let his son get to the league, be a starting quarterback? He's hyped him up for all these years, and then the kid's just going to like flop. So there is part of that where it's like when I watch him and I look into like all the stats on him and stuff, I'm like I just don't see it. But at the same time, it's just Deion Sanders' son. Like how can he possibly fail? So yeah, I mean, a guy like, I tiered him with Dart, and it's like, I still like those guys. And, I think that there may be safer picks. When I ranked Milrow and Howard higher than them, that's because like I said, if they get an opportunity to start, I think that they can become really dangerous fantasy weapons. But yeah, just from like a pure NFL standpoint, I do think that a guy like Shedeur, he's going to have all those opportunities where I think it's a somewhat safe investment for at least his rookie contract. And then, who knows what comes after that. Frank, what's your take on Shedeur?
I do think he is fairly safe. It's just the ceiling isn't what you'd want out of like somebody that's being touted as like a top five pick. To
Yeah, it
me,
just doesn't excite me like, like I feel like it should.
exactly. To me, he's like, and he's not even like Joe Burrow where he's like gonna pick you apart with his brain. Like he's smart and he sees the field well, but like not to the level where I'd feel comfortable taking him with that high of a pick. But to me, at best, he's going to be like a less athletic Geno with a worse arm.
Yeah, and I mean that's something too, right? I had quote tweeted somebody put out a video where it's like, "Oh, Shadeur's not athletic, then what about this?" And it was a 4-minute highlight tape of him running, but it was from all 4 years of college, and like almost none of the clips came from the same game. So it's like, yeah, okay, he could break off like a 15-yard run against Grambling State or something when he was at Jackson State. Like I'm not totally excited about that. Like that doesn't really get the juices flowing. And that's always been a thing I've talked about too, where it's like there are the running quarterbacks and there are the quarterbacks that can run. And Shadeur's maybe, a little more of a better runner than maybe a CJ Stroud was in college, but at the same time, I'm not buying any of those guys for their rushing ability. And Mahomes is kind of like the supreme example of the quarterback that can run, where, one, he has elite scrambling ability behind the offensive line, but he's also able to take off and go downfield and, give you 25, 30 rushing yards a game. But Shedeur, he can't really give you that. He doesn't move like that. So yeah, I guess that kind of it's like what we're all saying. It's like, it's just not like a crazy quarterback class. So, these guys that are being ranked second or third or anything like that, they're being ranked that by default. It's not because we're like, holy shit, like these are some of the best prospects we've ever seen. But Frank, I want to toss it to you because you have, and forgive me because this is a name I've only read. I have not heard pronounced. But Tyler, is it Shaw?
I think
It,
it's Shug, but like I've
it's
only read it too. I've never heard it
Yeah.
I think
pronounced.
it's I think it makes no sense. I think it's shuck, like shucking oysters.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I kind of like
Like
that
did you
pronunciation.
guys watch college basketball at all?
a
I
little.
really only watched the tournament.
Well, Florida's run, like their second best player throughout the run was Thomas Hauk, and it's like, how the fuck does that say Hauk? Haugh.
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah. Okay,
weird.
okay. So yeah, that would make sense then. Applying that same logic to this. So you have him second. I have him ninth, and Amaral has him seventh. And I've seen him get a lot of love. I believe he's like 6'5" or 6'6". He's huge, and I've seen some really flashy plays out of him. But what is it that has you ranking him all the way at second?
He's just got like, well, really, it's just because it's such a weak class. But outside of Cam Ward, he's really the only guy that has like all the tools that you'd want to see. And I guess Milrow does too, but I just think he's so consistent, and I don't trust him that he's probably going to put it together. I think if he's a decent quarterback, though, he can be like fantasy relevant. That's why I ranked Milrow so high. But with Shug, like he's got a good arm, he can throw on the run, and he's one of these. And I think he sees the field really well. But he's one of the older prospects where he doesn't actually have a lot of playing time. So I feel like he still has like quite a bit of room to develop. Whereas like Bo Nix as like a 5 or 6 year starter, it just seems like you've got less room for the prospect to really develop the same
Yeah.
way because you've seen so much of him on the field.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And to me, I feel like we almost kind of have the same read on him. But at the same time, I think I just kind of went about my rankings a little bit different because when I look at him, I kind of almost get like Davis Mills vibes. And I
Oh,
like
really?
Davis Mills. I was a big part of the Mills Mafia. And I liked him a lot. And that's kind of why I put him in that tier that I put him at the bottom, where I could see them, if they got an opportunity to be a starter, I could see them holding on to that opportunity. I don't know what that ceiling necessarily is, but like I thought like if the Texans actually wanted to just like give Mills a chance to develop, I think they could have turned him into something decent. Of course, it paid off for them taking Stroud and Stroud becoming what he has become. But I didn't think that they necessarily had to move off of Mills like they did. And I kind of make the same argument for the Titans. And of course, uh, both Mills and Levis were, at one point or now on my team. So I guess there was a little bit of bias there. But when I look at the Titans, like I don't think that they need to replace Levis right now, just because I don't feel like Ward is that top end prospect where it's like this is our answer at quarterback. I still think there are plenty of questions about around him where it's like if you feel like you can get a guy like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, it might be worth taking him because give Levis an opportunity to develop with his tools, see what he can get if you start to put a little bit better of a team around him, especially a better offensive line around him. That was a big problem that they had last year. But give him the opportunity, and if he develops, you might actually have something, and it might cover a pretty big need and not force you to use an early pick on a quarterback like that. Or if he sucks, you're probably going to be picking at the top again. But at the same time, you can't bank on being the first overall pick 2 years in a row. So I also understand that if you feel like Ward is that immediate and big upgrade, then you got to go for him. But I don't want to talk too much about Ward. But yeah, I think with Shug, I think that we were kind of on the same read. I just tiered him and ranked him a little bit different. But I could totally see him getting an opportunity. I don't think that he's going to be stepping into a situation where he's starting right away. So
Probably
uh,
not.
obviously it's going to be a backup opportunity. But if and when he does get that, I could definitely see him turning that into something. So I think it's interesting. And like I said, I do think that we're kind of looking at him the same, and just we kind of just ranked him a little bit different. Um,
In a normal class, I would have him probably more like 9 or 10.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy too where I think where he's drafted, like in terms of draft capital, will tell us a lot. I mean, if he's like a day two pick, like whether that's late in the second or any time in the third, then that might be a guy that's worth taking a little bit more seriously. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he's viewed by some of these NFL teams as well. Um, all right, the last two quarterbacks I wanted to highlight, and I'll kind of take the floor for myself because I have them ranked second and third. But in that tier with Milrow and Howard, I really like their fantasy upside. I mean, Frank, you touched on a little bit just what Milrow can bring if he becomes a starting quarterback. Just that rushing ability. I mean, we saw what Justin Fields has been able to do when he gets the opportunity to be a team starting quarterback. He's easily one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league, even though he's not really great at throwing the football at all.
He
Even
was a
so many
bad
people talk
quarterback.
about when he went to the Jets, all of a sudden people were like, "Oh, he's reunited with Garrett Wilson. He's going to give him a million targets." And then I saw somebody break down because it's like, "Oh, well, DJ Moore had the best year of his career. He had 1,300 yards and like 10 touchdowns." I think like 70% of his targets came at like the line of scrimmage or like within 5 yards, and it was a lot of DJ Moore making it happen himself. Where it's like, okay, so maybe we shouldn't be giving Fields that type of credit. I mean, I've talked about it. I think that unless they add another pass catcher, you can kind of bank on Wilson getting like 500 targets next year. So it might not matter how efficient he is with them. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that Fields is a guy that steps in and suddenly makes that passing attack like prolific. So I don't know what Milroe can bring from that standpoint. But if he gets the opportunity, I think that he can turn into a good enough passer to keep a job. And then with what he can bring from the rushing ability, I mean, obviously he just becomes an immediate danger, from a fantasy football standpoint. But Howard, I actually think is kind of the same way. And I was watching him on Gruden's QB school, and I'm a Gruden guy. Not to brag, he follows me on Twitter. And his guy Jake Malasek was on the yak today saying that all his follows and replies are from Gruden himself. So he's a Benny Fazio guy. But I like Gruden's breakdowns. I mean, because he's also not really giving opinions, right? He's bringing in anybody that wants to work. There he goes. He was getting a lot of shit. They were saying, "Oh, how come every quarterback at the QB school is white?" But it's like, okay, I mean, like, do you really think that like Shadur or Cam Ward feel the need to go on and do this? Like, they're especially Cam Ward, who's locked in at one. Like, no, they don't want to. And then he said, they were invited. Milroe was invited. He had a scheduling conflict. So anyone getting mad about that shit can go fucking suck a dick. But Howard, I mean, one thing that Gruden, and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on it, he pointed out is that he's the same size coming into the draft that Josh Allen was. He's an absolute tank. And I loved Will Howard at K-State. I feel like going into last year, I was low on him just because I'm not an Ohio State guy. I'm kind of a hater of Ohio State. So I kind of wanted to hate him, but I loved him at K-State, and he was an absolute dog. I loved him and Ben Sino, on that K-State team. I remember, and I always forget, I think they were playing Iowa State. That was where I fell in love with Sinnott, where they were playing in the snow and they had like this comeback win, and both of them were just making plays. And I like the way that Will Howard, first of all, when you compare the rushing yards to Josh Allen in college, he was actually a little bit, he had more rushing yards, and he was doing that in the Big Ten while Josh Allen was doing that. I don't even know what conference, like the Big Sky, is that what Montana's in?
Mountain
So
West.
yeah, the Mountain West. And
Yeah.
Howard is able to run and get positive rushing yards, which that's the big thing when you look at college stats, is sacks count against the rushing yard total. So you can tell who actually is a good or a bad rushing quarterback just by if they actually have positive rushing yards or not. And the fact that he had positive rushing yards and he was actually doing it at a higher clip than a guy like Josh Allen, who I know that Josh Allen is very raw coming in. I think that his rushing ability is being overlooked. The kid goes to Ohio State, and I know, okay, it's Ohio State, and they're a stacked program, all that stuff. But he steps in and he wins a national title in his first year. In a year where everybody could have given up after losing that Michigan game, I like the kid. So I think that, if he gets the opportunity to be a starting quarterback and if he can become, if he can be a day two or a day three pick, I'm going to be very high on him. And I feel like he's a guy that can drop a little bit in these rookie drafts. So that would be a guy I'd love to be able to snipe later on in the draft if the board allows me to do so. So, Frank, you had kind of talked about Miller a little bit. I don't know if you have more thoughts on him. I know that you had said that if we were doing this from a sort of an NFL standpoint versus a dynasty standpoint or a fantasy standpoint, he'd be one guy that you definitely rank a little bit different. So, what kind of goes into that thought process?
So what I was thinking there is essentially, I don't think he's ever going to be a legitimately good quarterback. I think from a fantasy perspective, all he needs to be is like a starter, and the rushing's going to make him like a viable fantasy quarterback if he's just good enough to keep a job, essentially. Um, but I wouldn't want to draft somebody like that in the second round. Because then you're hoping they're going to be your future franchise quarterback, and I just don't think he has it in him.
Yeah, and to me, and I think in this tier, I think one way that I'd put it is like that is like my player comp tier, and I'm talking about ceiling, right? I mean, I can definitely see the floor just like opening up and them bottoming out for sure. But I already said the whole Will Howard, Josh Allen thing, and I understand that as like an absolute dream of an outcome for him. But just when I look at if they want to be like the Walmart version of Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, I can definitely see that being the case. And Jalen Hurts himself, he was bouncing around in college. He got benched in the national championship famously. And then, we saw what he was able to do when he came back. When Tua got hurt and he had to step in for Tua. And then when he transfers to Oklahoma and, he almost won the Heisman there. And then he was still a late second round pick. And he got drafted to a team that had Carson Wentz as their quarterback. And Carson Wentz already had that deal and everything. So, I think these are two guys that they work hard. They've kind of been through some shit, especially Jalen Milroe. I think he's gotten a ton of shit. He did get benched by Saban that 1 year too, and he came back and he responded really well to that. And so I think that these are guys where when I'm saying I'm not totally excited when I look at the ceilings of Sanders and Dart, I look at the ceilings of these two guys, and it might take more, especially more luck. For them to hit those ceilings, but if they're able to do so, especially in a sort of weaker quarterback class, I get pretty excited about them. So, all right, let's move on
That's
to
definitely fair.
yeah. All right, let's move on to running
Real
backs.
quick on Milrow.
Yeah,
I find it interesting that he's attending the NFL draft. Like to me, that has to mean something. Like his camp or his agent, I don't think they're gonna set him up to be sitting there until the fucking pick 60 or something
yeah. To do the
on day
Levis
two.
again.
So like he might like I think there's a decent chance he could be quarterback too in this draft and sneak it
Really?
like maybe the Steelers take him or something like that. I think that's on the table just because it has accepted that invite.
Yeah, that
And
was something I wish I put a note because I meant to say that, so I'm glad you brought it up. Um, yeah, I mean that definitely means something to me because, like you said, like they're not going to receive that invite and then also accept it unless they felt like there was like a really good opportunity for him to get going because nobody wants to be that guy that's sitting in the green room all night. We've seen it with Rodgers and Brady Quinn and Johnny Football and then Will Levis 2 years ago. That sucks, and I mean that can definitely add fuel to the fire. But I mean, and I'm a chip on the shoulder guy. I like finding bulletin board material. I like finding stuff to be like, yeah, fuck you. I'm gonna go out and make you look like an idiot. But it almost feels like some sort of like kink if you're like that into bulletin board stuff that you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go to the draft and sit in that green room knowing that I'm going to be on TV all night because I'm dropping in the draft. I feel like that's maybe taking that a little too far. So you must have some confidence in the fact that he could go a little high. So all right,
That's true.
running backs. I feel like there's some good stuff here. There's definitely some interesting rankings as well. I think there's a little bit more to talk about. Um, I'll start with what do I want to start? Let's start at number 2 with you, Amaral. You have Judkins. Frank and I both have him at 5. You have him at 2. What do you see? And I think that, and I've seen it on Twitter too, where it's like a lot of people are saying when it comes to the top like 5 guys, you can really, besides Ginty, I think you can really rank that 2 through 5 in any order that you want, and you can't really be wrong at this point in time. I think a lot of people have Hampton at that RB2. Frank has him there. I have him at 3. You have him at 4. But what makes you put Judkins all the way up to 2?
I've just loved Judkins since he was a true freshman at Ole Miss. I tweeted during the 2022 season, I said like my tank for Quinshon Judkins in 2024 is going to be spectacular, something like that. I just love him. I think he's sort of an underrated pass catcher. I think he has like 55 or 60 career catches. Um, Ole Miss, they didn't really feature him as a pass catcher, but he was still able to do some things. Ohio State, Chip Kelly, I think, especially after that Michigan loss, Chip Kelly just got like more creative all around. But in some of these games, I forget which playoff game it was, where they split Quinshon Judkins out and like threw him a screen. So they were lining him up outside the formation. They were getting both Judkins and Henderson on the field at the same time and lining them up in different formations. So I thought that was pretty interesting, his usage. I think he's a really good runner too. I would say he does like anything like super spectacular, but he does everything well. I think he's going to be so like my ideal scenario for him is if Chicago takes him on day 2 and he's like the David Montgomery for Ben Johnson in Chicago.
I think that's a good comparison too, just as far as like what he can become in terms of like a role that he can serve. Because one thing that I saw on Twitter was people saying that he's a guy that goes in and he does the dirty work. He can block, like you were saying, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. But he was able to take a lot of relief off of Travion Henderson and which allowed Henderson to go in and thrive in the way that he did. So I do think that guys that go in and they just do everything and speaking of Ben Johnson, he was saying about DJ Moore, it's like you got to go and you got to block. If you no block, no rock, that type of thing. So, being able to block at any position that gets you on the field more. Not being able, not just being like a first two downs or a third down back or anything like that, being able to play on all four downs and provide something, even if you don't have the ball in your hands, will always get you on the field. And that's sort of the most valuable thing in terms of trying to get some touches. So I definitely see it there. I mean, I have him fifth, but I still think that all five of these guys, especially, and I like this class as a whole, but I think that all five of these guys would be at the top of my rankings if we were doing a rookie running back rankings from the last 5 years. Like these guys would all still be ranked very high, even in that big of a list. So I like it. I mean, I like the read. I like the take. One thing that I think I want to keep an eye on too, because I've seen everybody mocking the Raiders taking Ashton Genty, and I get it, right? They need a running back. He's the best running back, all that stuff, and they're picking in a spot where they can be the first team to really lay claim to him. I think people are really overlooking the fact that they're still going to have an early second round pick. There should be running backs available there. And if they want to trade up and maybe get back into the first round if they want to, they should be able to do that if they want to pay up for it. But I think we're overlooking the fact that Chip Kelly is in Vegas now. He's the OC and he could have an opportunity to get one of his two Ohio State running backs there. So I'm not totally sold on the Raiders using their sixth overall pick to get a running back. If they feel that highly about Ginty, then by all means they should go ahead and do it. But I think if you want to get one of these guys that's familiar with Chip Kelly's system, we know has thrived in Chip Kelly's system, I would be looking at the Raiders to use that second round pick on one of these running backs, especially because it is such a position of need for them. Um, let's see. I think Amaral, I kind of want you to keep the floor. I think you have like the most unique rankings. I think Frank and I, we all have like basically all the same players. We just have them ranked slightly differently. So I don't think there's too much conversation for us to have. But the next guy I want to talk about is Brashard Smith. You have him at fifth overall
Oh
on your
wow.
running back rankings. Frank and I, we don't have him in our top 10 at all. I'll be honest, that's not even a guy I was really considering. So when I saw that name, I was like, holy shit, I need to hear more about this. Can you maybe enlighten me a little bit more on him and DJ Giddens?
Sure. So I think I might have a thing for these receiver turn running back because Brashard Smith is also one of those. He started as a receiver at Miami, then he transferred to SMU, became a running back. I think he had like 1,400 yards last year. He can obviously catch the ball, but he's got some fucking juice, man. Like he's electric in the open field. I just love the way he runs. He runs in between the tackles a little bit too, but he's super dynamic in the open field. I just think he's going to be a big play waiting to happen in the NFL. I think there's a decent chance he sneaks into day two. He might be a fourth round pick, so he might be early day three, but I think he's gonna outperform that draft stock wherever he goes.
I like that. I'm looking at his profile now. 4.39, 40-yard dash. Gotta like that. That's always good. Okay, SMU. And then what about DJ Giddens?
Giddens, I think his like I was like watching, some video on Giddens recently and like the first name I thought just like his sort of like upright running style. I was like this guy looks exactly like DeMarco Murray when he runs the ball. And then I like pulled up their like combine measurements and testing numbers and they're like pretty much the same. It's like kind of wild. So he's not the pass catcher that DeMarco Murray was coming out of Oklahoma, but I think running wise, I think that could be his ceiling. Again, like DeMarco Murray had some pretty good fucking years in Dallas, but um, so I think that's his ceiling. But he's probably going to be a fourth round pick, maybe even a fifth round pick. But again, I think this is another guy that outperforms the draft stock. I think it is a really good draft. I think that top 4 or 5, to me, it's a top four of Genty, Judkins, Henderson, and Hampton. I think that top four is really solid and better than most years. But I think after that, five and on, I think is really just a standard class with a lot of depth and a lot of players that have unique and various skill sets.
I think those are interesting takes, and I kind of I agree with you on all those things when you're looking at this stuff. I do notice in a guy because once you made that player comparison, it made me think of another guy on this list, Caleb Johnson. You have him ranked eighth. Frank and I both have him ranked fourth. Personally, I'm a big fan. I mean, it was kind of funny. I don't know which account it was, but somebody tweeted out just a picture of Caleb Johnson, and they were like, what is your player comp for Caleb Johnson?" And just in that moment, looking at the picture that they posted, I said, "Holy shit, he looks just like Arian Foster." And I'm a huge Arian Foster guy. Like I loved him when he was in the pros. I loved him when he was on his old podcast. I listened to his current podcast every single episode. So I'm like a huge Arian fan on and off the field. But when I watch his tape, and then you were talking about looking at their size and everything, I was like, I wonder, when I make that comp, let me look at their sizes. Uh, Caleb Johnson is 6'1", 224. Arian was 6'1", 226. So even like the size comp there is similar. So that's a guy that I'm really into. I just think that he can, absolutely bang. I think that when he hits the gap and there's a hole there, he can just take off. He's not, a crazy breakaway speed guy, but when he hits the hole like that, he can really take off from you. And then if you want to try and tackle him, he can punish you on that as well. So I'm personally really high on him. What has you ranking him so low?
Just the athleticism. I think he's sort of lacking in that respect, which is kind of plays to that Foster comparison is why Foster, uh, wasn't highly regarded coming out of Tennessee. It's
He'll
because he
tell you that
wasn't
he had a
super
bad
athletic.
hamstring and they made him run the 40. And that's the only
Yeah,
reason that his
yeah.
time is pretty bad.
So I think that's actually not a bad comp. Like again, that's a ceiling. That's a best case
Yeah,
scenario for Caleb Johnson. But I think just the athleticism to me, a little bit scary. It's great in the Big Ten, especially in an offense like
yeah,
Iowa's,
especially
where
for Iowa.
where you're just required to bang. Really Iowa and Wisconsin before they made a coaching change, but. Um, overall, I think the athleticism is going to limit his upside, so that's why I opted for some guys that I think maybe have better athletic profiles.
Yeah, I like it, and especially looking at guys like that, and plus, I just like giving some shine to some guys because, like I said, Frank and I, we basically have the same guys on our list outside of Damian Martinez, and then I don't know, I guess, well, okay, and then I have Ollie Gordon in that spot, and then Martinez was the last guy that I highlighted, and Frank, I'll toss it to you just because I've had Amaral talking for all these guys, but what is it that you like about Damian Martinez? I mean, I know that 10th isn't like an insanely high ranking, but he made your list. He didn't make mine. I do know that was definitely a guy that I was considering, and Amaral, we can bring it back to you after. But is there anything that you like in particular about Martinez, Frank?
Yeah, what I really like about him is he's one of the best backs in college, like fighting through contact. Like his yards after contact, I think was top five in all of college football last year. Um, I'm totally blanking. He reminds me of like Ramondre Stevenson without like the fumbling issues, and
Always
kind
good.
of not Ramondre now, but
Yeah,
Ramondre in his good years.
yeah. Like when he first came on, he had juice and all that. Yeah, for sure.
But that's pretty much it. His like yards after contact is pretty great. I mean it's like a full yard behind Genty's, but I think it's still like 4.5 yards after contact, 4.7, something like that.
Yeah. No, I like it. And, I was looking at the list. Like, I mean, Dylan Sampson, he's a guy that I've been really high on. And I was almost shocked to see that I was like pretty modest with my ranking compared to, I mean, Amaral, I ranked him ninth, Amaral had him 10th, and then you had him seventh. So we're all pretty much in the same spot. But I always thought that Sampson was a guy that I was kind of like, almost like keeping up my sleeve, like, don't sleep on this guy. But I do think that he's been getting a little more play, especially in like the Twitter sphere and everything. So he's been getting a little bit more attention. But I like him a lot, Samson, but that's also a guy where I'm seeing, I think, Frank, maybe we were talking about this in the DMs one time where somebody was basically talking like Samson's like an absolute lock to be like a stud in the pros and all that. And somebody compared him. It's like, well, what about Jalen Wright? And he's like, oh, well, he's way better than Jalen Wright. It's like, well, not really. I mean, when you look at one, when they were in the same backfield, Jalen Wright was the lead back in that field, and he was better than him. Like he was just more efficient with his touches. And Sampson, he had the benefit of being kind of the only running back in that backfield this past year at Tennessee. But when you look at the efficiency, he still wasn't there in terms of what Jalen Wright was in that system. And then when you compare the athletic testing and all that, Jalen Wright's like also a very good running back. I feel like people are kind of just sleeping on the fact that he got drafted to a situation where he was one behind A Chain, and then also he was stepping into maybe take over the Raheem Mostert role, which now he has an opportunity to do so this year. And then also that offense was just really bad. I saw somebody today comparing Tyreek's 2023 season to his 2024 season, and I guess I think he ran like 200 more routes this past year, but he obviously did not have anywhere near the output. And it's like, what happened? It's like, well, Tua missed 6 games and they weren't able to throw the ball for a month and a half. I think that's more of the explanation. Like, yes, okay, Tyreek, he got a little bit older and he was dealing with a wrist injury. He had some off the field stuff as well. But I think that the bigger issue at hand was just the fact that they had like Snoop Huntley playing quarterback for half the season. I don't, I don't think that it's worth looking too deep into, the fall off of Tyreek Hill. But, that was also part of it too, where, they still wanted to give Mostert an opportunity because he was coming off of a season where he led the league in touchdowns. But now that the backfield's clear open, I think Jalen Wright's actually a really interesting running back going into this year. But, I like Samson for kind of all the same reasons, like that I liked Wright. So I think that's pretty interesting. I don't know. Do you guys have any other running backs that you want to shout out? All right.
I will just say that it was difficult for me to get this list to 10. So, hold on a second. What I have here, like after Caleb Johnson for me at 8, it was pretty tough. Like I had Tootin and Sampson wrapping up my top 10, but I also consider guys like RJ Harvey, Jarquez Hunter, Cam Scatterbu, Ollie Gordon, Devin Neal, who you both have listed, and Trevor Etienne. And I don't know. I just didn't really know what to do with like 9 through 16. I could have ranked them any. It might depend on the day, really, how I rank those guys.
Yeah, and kind of all those guys in that bottom tier, those are guys where I can definitely see it. I think they can all be really good pros. I don't know what their fantasy upside is necessarily going to be, but that's one of those where it could really change once I see how things go in the draft and what their situation is and kind of what their pathway to touches are. Because, I mean, any of these guys, I mean, like Scatabo, like he could be unbelievable. He was so sick at Arizona State. So, if he falls into a situation where all of a sudden he could be getting starting running back touches or at least being like the 1B in a backfield or something, I think that he can really be something. But I don't necessarily trust these guys to provide on the same level as the ones kind of more in that elite tier. But all right, let's move on to. Let me share my screen once more.
Scattaboo reminds me a lot of what's his name? James Conner.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, just like I mean, just a guy that's not going to quit on a run. And I mean, we saw who are they playing? Was that in the playoff? Did they make the playoff? What were they
They
playing
did,
in?
yeah. It was
And
the
everyone,
playoffs.
I mean,
Yeah.
my guy Ray GQ was like shitting all over Scattaboo, all in the first round. Oh, was it against Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they're
Yeah.
Oh,
getting
he
It
cooked on, and
went
then
was.
all of a sudden
off
it's like,
that
holy
game.
shit, like they might beat them right now. And then that was an unbelievable game. And that second half that he played, where he's like throwing up on the sideline, then coming out and making plays, that was unbelievable. That was like one of the coolest like games I've ever seen, like from like an individual performance. That was unbelievable. But all right, wide receiver. Who are some guys that I want to talk about? All right.
Matthew Golden has to be number one.
Yeah,
We'll get to
that
Golden.
was
We'll get to Golden in
surprising.
a second, but I will say I was stunned to see. First of all, we all came with three different wide receiver ones. I have Travis Hunter. I said on my last stream that I'm counting him. I'm just going to consider him to be a wide receiver now. I think that especially when you're looking at the teams that he could be going to, Cleveland, they need wide receiver help a lot more than they need cornerback help. Same thing with the Giants. If those were the two teams that he's likely to go to, I feel like they're going to be using him in that spot. Of course, things could be a little bit different on the Giants if he's lining up on the other side of Malik Neighbors. But I just think that he is the best wide receiver in this draft from a pure skill standpoint. So assuming that he's going to be playing significant enough snaps, I have to rank him highly. Amaral, you have an asterisk with him off your list. What exactly does that mean?
That means I'm just unsure. Like, I guess we'll see in a couple weeks how he's announced. Like, when Goodell goes to the podium and reads the card, I'm super interested in hearing how he's announced, whether that's receiver, defensive back, or both. But if he's going to play the majority of his snaps on offense, I would have him number 2 behind Abuka.
So that
But
so that was actually the first receiver I wanted to talk about. So you have Ibuka as your wide receiver one. Um, I feel like that's a pretty, not that I think he's bad or anything. I feel like it's a pretty hot take to have him ranked as your wide receiver one. I have him as 3. Frank has him as 5. So what makes you put him all the way above a guy like Tet, who has sort of been the consensus wide receiver one, outside of Travis Hunter, with making the assumption that Hunter's going to be splitting time and everything. McMillan's been the only pure receiver that I've really seen seriously mocked. I know that some people have had Matthew Golden as their wide receiver one. I don't really buy that. But what makes you put Egbuka all the way at 1?
He's just steady, man. Like there's nothing super sexy about him. Like he reminds me of Amon-Ra in like a lot of ways. Like I think he's going to be a really good blocker in the NFL. I think he's just going to continue to find ways to get open, and I think he's just going to be a solid pro. And again, this is a like it's pretty similar to the quarterback class. Like it's not the greatest receiver class, not anywhere near the top end upside that we've seen in years past. So I think his floor is really high, and I think he does have a ceiling of being a wide receiver one in fantasy. And also, the Ohio State receivers just don't fail. Like they're all good,
Yeah, and
all
like
of
it
them.
means something to
So
me, right? Is he the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State now?
he is.
Yeah,
Yes, he
like that
is.
that
Yeah.
means something to me. When you come from a program like that, I don't care if you play your whole career there, like all 4 years or any shit like that. Just going on to be like the quote unquote greatest receiver in school history, that definitely means something to me. So, I mean, I value him a lot. I mean, I put him in that rank where, Travis Hunter, I just think that he's the best receiver, and especially if he wants to commit his time to being a wide receiver, then I have no choice in my head but to rank him wide receiver one. And I said it on the last mock draft where when you look at, when Jamar Chase and then what's the cornerback's name from Houston that just got the big deal? Um,
Stingley? Did you
Stingley.
say corner?
They
Yeah.
both just reset the markets at their position, and Chase is still getting paid like 10 million more. So I think when you're looking at money, wide receiver is obviously the one that pays more. But of course, when you're like a hybrid guy, you can definitely leverage that, and it doesn't really matter if you're playing full time there or not. But just from like a fantasy perspective, I really like Hunter. I think that he's just a great pure receiver, and he also has unbelievable instincts when it comes to going up and getting the ball. So I really like that. But yeah, I mean, I have Ibuka, I have him as third, and I kind of just view him as like, yeah, I could, maybe I'm not sure what his ceiling is. I'm not sure how high that goes, especially compared to a guy like Hunter or a guy like McMillan. But I really like that floor. I think there is a good argument for him to have maybe the safest floor of all these guys. So I really like that, and I do like the take as having him as your wide receiver one. Frank, what had you drop him all the way down to five? And I know that's not too like damning on him either. Like this is a pretty solid list itself. But yeah, what made you have him ranked five?
To me, as you said, he's like a really high floor sort of guy. I just don't think he's got that that ceiling of like a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. To me, he's going to be like a really dependable, like dirty work slot receiver. I just don't think he's going to be like a legitimate star. Whereas some of the other guys, like Tet, Travis, and Luther Burden in particular, I think all of them could actually end up being legit number ones potentially on a team.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
not Burden because Burden's more of like a Debo type piece, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that all three of us have pretty good logic on it. And I think that we're all, I think we all like the player itself. But yeah, I think that that's kind of what I was thinking as well with my rankings, where it's like when I'm looking at the ceiling, maybe he does have the safest floor of them all. But yeah, when I'm trying to project ceiling here, I kind of see it with some other guys. I mean, I'll be honest, like I'm kind of back and forth on him, just as far as like what can he really be. Just because like I know people like to make like the Mike Evans or the Drake London comps, and I'm not a huge fan of either one of those comps there, especially not Mike Evans. I could definitely see the Drake London a little bit more, but Frank, I think I've seen you talk about that too as well, Frank. I forget who it was that you said maybe you see him more as like a I
it
don't
was
know,
a mix of Drake London and T. Higgins.
yeah, that's what it
But I
was.
don't really see the Mike Evans one either. Mike Evans is just such a better athlete, and
Yeah.
he's a lot stronger.
Yeah, like Mike Evans is just like a big dog, like he's just a tank. Where yeah, it's like Drake London's more of like a skinnier guy with like a little bit more wiggle, and I think that Tet he's kind of I mean I don't know what the actual height and weight is compared to those guys, but I
I think
look
he's
at
like
him and like
212.
he looks very skinny and all that stuff, not in like a detrimental way. I just feel like when I'm comparing those guys, he's like maybe a little more of like a looser, fluid guy, when it comes to his play style, but. Yeah, let's go to Golden now. Let's definitely talk about Matthew Golden. That is a guy that I do not have in my top 10. Amaral, you have him as second.
Yeah, that
Frank,
shocks me.
you have him as eighth. I will say, I mean, like he was definitely in the running. When I look at it, I'm just not. I'm not crazy about him. And Amaral, you remember because I think we talked about this. I think I might have had you on the draft shows last year. But I was not big on AD Mitchell, and I liked Xavier Worthy. I had him ranked like I think he might have been like my wide receiver six in my rookie rankings, and like honestly, I feel fine about those because I also had him in a tier where it's like I had him in a tier with Malachi Corley, where it's like I want to see where they go because I want to see how they can be used. And of course, Worthy went to the Chiefs and he was used perfectly and he was great. And then Malachi Corley, he went to the Jets, which was an absolute mess. And then he wasn't able to do much besides drop the football an inch before he scored his first career touchdown. But yeah, I mean, I just my big knock on AD Mitchell last year was when you watch the highlights, it's like, holy shit, this is the best receiver I've ever seen. And then you go to the box score and you're like, wait, he only had like 40 yards in that game. He just had like a really sick touchdown catch. And it's just like when I look at the box score compared to the highlights, compared to all the thoughts on him, I don't see it match up. And I think that his box scores are a little bit better than AD Mitchell's maybe were more consistently. But I mean, I saw something. Let me see if I can find the let me see if I can find the tweets. But I mean, I was just like looking through because I was like, let me find some stats. Yeah, it was all round one wide receivers to average less than 85 yards per game in their best college season. It's Matthew Golden projected, Ruggs, Dorsett, Calvin Ridley, Kelvin Benjamin, Xavier Worthy, Quentin Johnston, Jalen Rager, Rashad Perriman, John Ross. So that's since 2014 until now. Those are round one wide receivers to average less than 85 yards per game, in their best college season. And that's kind of how I feel, about Matthew Golden. I saw some people making comparisons to Ruggs. Let me see if I can find. Let me see, Matthew Golden, Henry Ruggs. Let me see if I can find. There was like another tweet I saw that kind of compared some stats to that. Matthew Golden player comps. Okay, I'm not gonna pretend to understand what these 0.91 CA reception divided by TMPA. I don't know what the fuck that is. Early declared, projected 20th overall, but the player comps are Will Fuller, Henry Ruggs, Curtis Samuel. But I think that those are fair when I see how they play, where it's like, I get it, right? He ran this unbelievable 40 time. He's really fast. He's able to make some highlight plays.
I
But
don't think the speed shows up on tape like it did testing.
I saw another one where it was him, it was Golden, and it was Bond. They were running the same route, just on different sides of the field. And the clip was supposed to show Golden like getting
I know the
separation.
exact one you're talking about.
Yeah, and somebody was like, "Well, are we going to act like we don't see Bond at the top running the same route and getting way cleaner and way better separation?"
It was a
And
comeback, right?
yeah, yeah, it was like a comeback. They were both kind of like running to the hash and then cutting back at that. And yeah, and that's just kind of like how I feel. Like you were saying, it's like when I watch it, it's like yeah, like I get it. Like when he's doing it at the combine, he's running these drills. Like I understand. Like on paper, it's like holy shit, this guy's perfect. But then when you break it down, you like make the comparison to Henry Ruggs, or yeah, you look at him running a route compared to a teammate that's running the exact same route. It's like I just don't necessarily see it. So Amaral, why did you have him? And maybe I'm being a little extreme with him. I mean, like I said, I was extreme with AD Mitchell last year, where I ranked him. I think he was wide receiver 18 before the draft, and then I moved him up to like 13 post draft. And I think even coming out of his rookie year, I'd rank him even higher than that. So I was definitely being a little dramatic, maybe, and then maybe I was trying to make a point or something. But he was still going to be like outside looking in, maybe in that 7 through 10 range for me. So what was it that stood out to you to have him ranked wide receiver two?
Well, he has that speed, but I don't think he plays anything like Henry Ruggs. Like, I think he's better, much better in contested catch situations, 50-50 balls, but he still has that speed that a guy like Ruggs had. Specifically those games against Arizona State in the playoffs and Georgia in the SEC championship, like he balled the fuck out in those games. And again, I think it was just like I remember texting one of my friends like I love Matthew Golden, and that was like before the combine, before he like really blew up. And I think it's just a lot of it was like the body control and some of the catches he was making, I thought were really impressive. So he was standing out to me in those situations. That's why I have him that high.
Yeah, and I think it's fair. I mean, Ruggs also wasn't like a terrible pro. I mean, he wasn't like taking off right away, and of course, his career was tragically cut short. I mean, of course, he did something stupid, but I do feel bad for the guy. Actually, it was kind of like sad when I was looking through these tweets. Like, I typed in Matthew Golden, Henry Ruggs, And the Twitter search is like so broken that I was getting like plenty of other shit about Henry Ruggs, and it was like Derek Carr talking about how they need to be there for him, and I was like, it is pretty sad, like how his fucking career ended. Like that blows. But feel bad for the guy. I do see him. Is he getting out? Is he out? I feel like there was like a random clip of him working out like a year ago, and it was very bizarre. It's like, how the hell did this guy get out there? But yeah,
No,
I
I
mean,
didn't hear he was out.
I think he might be like, I don't think he's like doing like a life sentence or anything, is he?
No, I don't. I didn't. I thought it was like 10 years.
Yeah, 3 to 10 years in prison. That was in 2021. And then yeah, I don't know if there's like any update on when he might be out. Oh, he's making 250 an hour at the Nevada prison camp. That's good. But yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, maybe it's not like a perfect one-to-one comp, but it is also one of those things where it's like a guy shoots up the board. Like Golden was like, he was getting love coming into like the combine and everything, but whenever a guy like shoots up the board because of his combine performance, I'm always like a little sketched out by that. Because it's like, well, he didn't do anything by playing football. So I always, kind of look at that a little sideways. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'm not like betting against him to be like a good pro or anything, but yeah, when I'm looking at these other guys, especially, I'll pull the screen back up just to show my tiers and kind of explain my thoughts. But yeah, I mean, like Travis Hunter is just a guy that I think has a really high ceiling. Tet, maybe he's never going to be like that true wide receiver one. I do kind of like what you were saying, Frank, about like the T. Higgins. I think that he could thrive in a role like that. If he gets drafted onto a team that already has a really good wide receiver one, I think that is best case scenario for him. I think that he's a guy almost like Jordan Addison, where they're able to coexist with another good receiver, especially if it's maybe somewhat of different skill sets and everything. I think that would be really good for him, and him getting drafted into a wide receiver room like that wouldn't scare me away from him. And then these next three guys, I really like their floors. I'm not totally sold on them reaching their ceilings, but if they can, I really like those ceilings. And then these guys are all guys where I think they can be good pros. I can definitely see the pathway to them being really good wide receivers, but I think I said earlier on the show, I'm also not going to like hold my breath and count on them, becoming future wide receiver ones in this league. So I see the tools, I see the measurables. I really like these players, but I'm also not like holy shit, like I'm not going to run to the bank and be like I need to put everything on Jalen Noel being like the next great wide receiver. So I could definitely see it panning out, but I also want to be a little realistic with those rankings. So let's see. The next guy, well, I feel like I kind of covered everybody I wanted to cover. Is there anybody that you guys want to call out? There are two guys that I do want to call out that they were never going to make my list, but they are two guys that I'm going to be looking at in our rookie draft, talking rounds 3 and round 4. One guy that I'm really interested in, I want to see how he gets drafted in this league by the NFL. Kyron Lacey. I mean, he had that really weird car accident. I don't think that he was like I don't think he's being held responsible for that guy's death. I don't really know what the deal is with that, but obviously there are going to be question marks around that. But it looks like he's still working out. He's still pursuing the draft and everything. I thought he was really good at LSU. I don't necessarily think he fits the mold as being like the next great LSU receiver, but I feel like he's a guy almost like a Kayshon Boutte where he had his issues off the field. Maybe he wasn't necessarily delivering by the end of his career when he was getting drafted, but they could wind up in a pretty interesting situation just because of how they fall in the draft. Kyron Lacey is definitely a guy I'm going to keep my eye on. And another guy is Nick Nash. He was the leading wide receiver in the country this year, if I'm not mistaken. He was at San Jose
San Jose
State.
State.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
don't know.
People
I
thought
mean,
he should have
that's
won the Bolitnikoff over Hunter.
yeah, exactly. So like that's a guy I'm gonna keep my eye on because like one thing that I said when who's the guy Jaleel McLaughlin, right? He was the leading rusher coming into his rookie season, leading rusher in college football. Had one of like the great yardage seasons ever. And I understand that he wasn't playing at like a big school or in a big conference or anything, but guys like that, I mean, yeah, okay, McLaughlin stepped in and like now he's not really worth shit. But I mean, his rookie year, you could have gotten him for really cheap. You probably could have gotten him for one fab. I think that's exactly what Simcoe did. And there were opportunities to at least sell him. And I think it's a little bit different for running backs, right? Any running back that's on a roster is worth having in Dynasty just because they're really one injury away from getting more significant touches. So it's a little bit different for a wide receiver to break out like that. But he's a big player. He like I said, he led the league he led the country in receiving and everything. So for a guy that is almost certainly going to go late in rookie drafts, that's definitely a guy that I'm going to be keeping my eye on. I don't know if there's anybody, Frank. Is there anybody that you kind of want to highlight, whether they're on your
Um,
list or not?
I know I've already mentioned him and he's on my list, but I love Kyle Williams. To me, he's like a poor man's Garrett Wilson almost. Like, I think he's the best route runner in the draft. I think he's got the best release package in the draft. Plus, when I look at his tape, like his speed really shows up. Like I think he looks quicker or faster on tape than Golden does, but Golden's testing was pretty significantly better.
Yeah, I'm interested in like game speed as well. That's one thing that's always stuck with me was the Rams, and I believe it was with Cooper Cup. But they were like the one of like the first teams to really like go all in on like the on-field tracking and everything. And they're like, yeah, I mean, he doesn't test. He's not like off the charts with his testing, but when we look at how he plays, he's like hitting some of the fastest speeds on the field during the games. He's all over the place, and that was how they were able to find a diamond in the rough like him. I think he was like a day two pick, and then all of a sudden he puts up a triple crown season, and all that stuff. So that's always been something that stands out to me too. Is like yeah, like maybe we should be paying more attention to what they're doing when the ball is being snapped, and then they're actually getting in-game reps. So I like Williams a lot too. That was a guy that, like I was saying, I was definitely aware of who he was when Cam Ward was at Washington State, and then when he left and Washington State was really not too relevant on the national scale. I became, maybe a little less weary of who he was, but that's a guy that I'm definitely very interested in. I have him at the top of that final tier on my list, and yeah, I think seeing where he goes, it feels like he's going to be a day two pick. I know that there've been, talks about, him visiting with the Titans, and that could be interesting if he's reunited with Ward. Uh, I suddenly become really interested in that. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that he's going to be a guy to keep an eye on because he could be like a very sneaky guy in that second round of the rookie draft. Amaral, you got anybody else that you're really interested in?
I have a few. I'll just keep it to one though. I'm a big Xavier Restrepo fan. Cam Ward kind of relied on him this past year. He had over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns for Miami. Played 5 years at Miami, just continued to get better. Didn't test the greatest, but he seems to be a guy that's always getting open, especially when his team really needs it. So I'm a Restrepo fan.
I like that too. That was actually another guy I meant to put a note down to make sure I mentioned him. So he saved me once again. But yeah, and I think that's perfect coming off of what we were just saying about Kyle Williams too, where I think in game he maybe steps up a little bit more and can show that speed. And yeah, like you said, I mean, I'm the 40 time. Yeah, it's like kind of funny and it it's like a little embarrassing to like show up and when everybody's like, why the hell did he voluntarily run that 40 at his pro day? And everything like that. But like you said, I mean, he's a guy that gets open. I think, bringing up Renfro again, where it's like that's just a guy that you can trust to, move the chains for you. And, maybe he's never going to be like the next great wide receiver in this league. But I mean, even Hunter Renfro put up like a top 15 wide receiver season at one point. So you never know what kind of opportunities these guys might fall into as well. And if a guy is like that and he can become a trusted target, if those other guys in the wide receiver room aren't able to step up, I mean, we saw it with Tom Brady, right? Like if he can't rely on you, he's just not going to give you the ball. And if he knows that he can rely on you, then you're gonna get the ball. So I like a guy like Restrepo, and kind of like what we were saying about Will Campbell, where it's like, this guy has like every reason now to be like, I'm gonna show everybody like they're fucking stupid. If okay, go ahead and count me out. I like guys with that chip on their shoulder, so I think he's got something to prove. And yeah, I mean, he was always a highly productive receiver when his number was called. So and his number was called a lot in this last season. So I definitely like him too. That is a guy that I'm definitely. He was definitely one of my final cuts when I was breaking it, when I was, you know, shedding it down to just 10. So, um, all right. Our
He's
last set of
somebody
pass.
I'd love to see on the Pats.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, especially with
Same.
with
Yeah.
McDaniel's coming back. I mean, that he seems like the exact type of guy that would thrive in a McDaniel's system. So, if we're gonna be seeing, I would hope that McDaniel's is maybe adapting a little bit more to the league. But he also had some good stuff in there, and I mean, we won plenty of Super Bowls with him as the play caller. Of
Oh
course,
yeah,
Tom Brady was the quarterback. But if we can keep some of those old McDaniel's principles while adapting to what the league is, I feel like Restrepo could be a pretty good fit there. So, all right, let's get to the tight ends. I mean, there's not like a ton that I want to talk about with the tight ends. It's not like a crazy deep class or anything. Um, you know, Warren, Warren, Loveland, 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 Warren. I do want to start with that debate. Um, I've seen a lot of people talking about it, and I quote tweeted a guy yesterday, and of course, nobody can just like read a tweet and like accept the fact that like I was literally just giving stats. I was not giving an opinion. I was not saying that Loveland stinks or anything like that. I was just pointing out the fact because it was one of the underdog guys. They were saying I have Warren as a tier above, or I have Loveland as a tier above Warren as a pass catcher, and it's not even close. And I just took exception to that because I just thought it was a bit ridiculous. I mean, Warren just put up 1,200 yards as a tight end in college. Uh, in 16 games, he had 1,200 yards, and I believe in 39 games, Loveland had 1,600. So it's like, when we're talking about that, there is context that needs to be added to that, right? I mean, Michigan, they don't pass the ball as much. He did not have a great quarterback, while Warren had one of the better quarterbacks in the country throwing to him. Especially he was Drew Aller was cooking at the end of last year. But to just say that it's not even close and that Loveland is like a full tier above Warren as a pass catcher, I thought that was a bit ridiculous. Like we just saw a guy put up 1,200 yards. Loveland has never come close to that. I mean, come on, let's like give the guy a little bit of credit. I understand that Loveland's like 3 years younger and everything too, so he can grow into that. And I think from an NFL standpoint, Loveland, maybe there is more value because he seems like a more participant. He seems like a better participant when it comes to blocking. Feels like he can play a little more in line than Tyler Warren can. So in terms of being on the field and being able to get all those reps and just constantly be on the field, there is I think there is more value in what Loveland can bring. But at the same time, I mean, Warren, he could potentially be a top 10 pick in this draft, which doesn't always pan out, right? We saw that with Kyle Pitts, but I like the guy. I mean, I think he's a sick athlete. I think that he's an absolute just like dog when it comes to playing football. He wants to go out there and he wants to get dirty. And he's a great receiver. So, I was just pointing out that this is how many yards this guy put up in one season. This is how many yards this guy put out in a career. And all of a sudden, I have like Michigan fans. I had one Ohio State fan in my mentions being like defending Colston Loveland. I was like, shame on you to defend a Michigan guy of all people. I mean, I understand that Penn State is also a Big Ten school, but that was just a bit ridiculous to me. But yeah, I mean, I like both guys. Like, I'm not saying that I think Loveland stinks. I was just pointing out the fact that it's like we've seen Warren do something that we haven't seen Loveland even come close to doing. So to say that it's not even close in terms of pass catching, I thought was a bit ridiculous. But Frank, what is it that kind of had you go against the two of us and put Loveland first?
So to me, he's just got like a higher ceiling, and I do think I agree it's ridiculous to say it's not close at all. I can see that dude's argument, but I think he took it way too far.
Yeah, and like that's the
Um,
thing. It's like I'm not saying that it's even wrong, like to say like, oh, this guy's like better. It's just to say like it's not even close. Like I think he's way better as a pass catcher. Like you want to say as an overall tight end, I think that's a totally fair argument. But yeah, as a pass catcher, I think that they're, fairly even, and then it just comes down to preference.
yeah, but I view um Warren more like a TJ Hawkinson, whereas I think Loveland could like potentially be like McBride or Kelsey, where they're like actually the focal point of the offense.
I like it.
I'm not sure Warren. I mean, he definitely could. I'm not going to say it like that, but I think it's less likely that Warren is able to fill that sort of role, where Loveland, I think, actually might be able to.
Yeah,
Just Loveland's a great route runner.
yeah, yeah, and like I mean, one of those things, right? I mean, we saw Nico Collins. He did not put up great stats at Michigan, but when you look at the measurables and then you look at what he was doing on his reps, it was to me, and I'm always going to be haunted by what I traded him away for in this league, but to me, as somebody that drafted him in the rookie draft. It just seemed clear to me. It's like this is a guy that's worth betting on, and just because the college production wasn't there, doesn't mean that he can't go on to do it. You do have to factor in the context of the situation he was in. So, yeah, I mean, I think that those are the consensus one and two. I think that maybe where they end up, and maybe how high Loveland ends up going, that could definitely sway things once we see landing spot and everything. But yeah, I mean, that's like the consensus one and two. There's really no argument there. The other guy that I wanted to talk about was Harold Fannin. I've talked about him a little bit when I've been doing my mock drafts, but I put him above those other guys. I like Arroyo. I like Taylor. Gunnar Helm, I'm not crazy about, but I feel like he's a guy that, could be like a round 3, round 4 pick. And, he could just be a guy, and maybe, his ceiling, I think, is more of being in that sort of tight end 9 to tight end 25 range where they're only separated by like 1.5 points per week or something. But yeah, I don't think he's ever going to be like a high end starter or anything like that. But I like Arroyo. I like his athletic ability. I like his run after the catch ability. I like Harold Fannin a lot. I can't put him in that same tier as the top two guys, but I think that he can end up there with them. I mean, I get it, right? He's coming out of the MAC, right? What is he? What school is he again?
Harold
Bowling
Fannin,
Green.
was he
He's Bowling
Bowling
Green.
Green?
Bowling Green, yep. But it's like when you look at, when he played against top 25 competition or at least Power 5 competition, it was what, A&M, and then I forget the other school. He went
Penn
crazy.
State, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Penn State. He went insane against them. Like he had two of his best games against them. So it's like, we can't ignore the fact. We can't just like chalk it up to like, oh, he was playing against scrubs, like he wasn't really doing shit. When he played against real solid competition and one team was really good, he absolutely embarrassed them and he embarrassed the guys that were covering him. So it's like, I think that he's a guy that should be drafted into a more solid situation. I would like to see the Eagles go out and get him. I think that, maybe not starting right away over a guy like Dallas Goedert could be really good for him. But ending up in a situation like that where, or even, like McBride in Arizona behind Zach Ertz or Ben Sino in Washington behind Ertz again, I think that those are more ideal situations for a guy like Fannin where he can get a little bit more used to the NFL speed, learn a little bit under these guys. And I know that his athletic testing wasn't as great, but then when you like, kind of like what we've been saying, when you look at him on the tape, it's like he's embarrassing guys, and he's able to break away pretty well for a tight end. I'm very interested in him, and I have him, knocking on the door of that tier. I don't think that he deserves to be in there right now, just like as a prospect, but I think that when we're 2-3 years from now, if we were to like look back at these rankings, it's like, yeah, now if I were to redo it, I could see myself being in a spot where I'd put Fannin up there with them. I think that he can definitely pan out and be that. So I'm very interested in him. I'm very interested to see where he goes, but I also think that we're going to be looking at him late in the second round in rookie drafts, and I think that he's going to be pretty interesting. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on him or if there's any other guys. Amaral, I don't know if you have anybody that you want to shout out here. You managed to get 10 tight ends on the board.
Yeah, I think my tier one and tier two, I think it's almost entirely contingent on landing spot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like Warren and Loveland, I'll probably flip-flop a million times before the draft, and landing spot will be the ultimate decider there. Same thing with Arroyo, Fannin, and Mason Taylor. I think they're all pretty close together. Fannin's the worst, relatively speaking, worst athlete of that trio, but it really doesn't matter. Like the guy just produces. So I like all five of those tight ends, and I think we've kind of seen a growing trend recently here where there's been a pretty good stretch of good tight end classes, and forever it was kind of thought of that tight ends, was the most difficult position to play as a rookie. Just adjusting from college to the NFL was super difficult, but these guys are starting to produce right away. So I think that trend's going to continue, and I think we're going to see good tight end production from at least one or two guys every year as rookies. Um,
Yeah, and
but
I
the
think it's
one
one of
guy,
those things too where it's like where it almost feels like we're never going to see like another truly bad wide receiver class, just because all these
yeah,
kids are like coming in like so specialized. And I mean, some guy like Travis Hunter was running like the TikTok routes and everything, at his pro day. But it's like all these guys, they come in so specialized in receiving, and I think that we can kind of apply that to tight ends as well. So it's like, maybe they're going to lose some recipes in terms of just being like two-way tight ends and being able to line up, be like inline guys and stand in there and block. But I think a lot of these big guys are coming in more athletic than they've ever been, more skilled as pass catchers than they've ever been. So if they can learn that physicality and be able to stay on the field enough that like, they can sit in there and block and, maybe get out there and it's not like an automatic giveaway that it's a pass play because they're on the field or something, then, I think that we can kind of apply that same thing where it's like maybe we're never going to see like a truly bad tight end class either because all these guys can go out there and catch. And I mean, I've made the comparison for Fannin to Isaiah Likely, and you can say, well, Likely is still behind Mark Andrews until he's not, but like when Likely's number is called on when Andrews is hurt and likely has to start. He has almost always gone off. And then we saw at the end of last year that it looks like even with Andrews in the lineup and with Andrews producing, likely can still also go off. And I think that the Ravens going into this next year, I don't think they're going to move on from Mark Andrews. I know a lot of people have said that, and that was kind of a knee-jerk reaction after he dropped that pass in the playoffs and everything. That's like one of their best players ever, like in franchise history. He just set the record for most touchdowns in a season by a Raven, and they love him there. Just because he dropped the final pass of the season, I think it would be ridiculous to just move on from him. But I think that they're going to come in and they're going to say, we need to get you two way more involved. And it's like, Zay Flowers, he can be, a guy to help you get down the field between the 20s. But I think when you get to the red zone and when you really want to stretch the field, you can do that, with your two tight ends. So I think that even though likely is not the tight end one on paper there, he's still going to be a really valuable asset, especially from a dynasty standpoint. And I think Fannin kind of fits into the same mold as that. So, it might take a little bit for him to catch on, but, I think that when he does get that opportunity, I think he can be pretty good. So, Frank, you got anybody else that you want to shout out for the tight ends?
Just speaking about Fannin, um, I think in the right system he could actually be really good. He reminds me a lot of Jonnu Smith.
I
And
like
seeing the success he had with the Dolphins last year, I think Fannin could there's definitely a place for him on a starting offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
And in
I
that
think
land,
that
like the Patriots were the only ones that couldn't figure out how to use Jonnu Smith.
Legit.
Like
we saw, he was part of like a record-breaking free agent class. We gave him so much money, and they bring in him and Hunter, and it's like holy shit, like they're gonna do the Gronk and Hernandez thing again, and he was awful. He was god awful.
but he was better than Pitts in Atlanta. That
Yeah,
immediately
he was. He
following.
like legit
Yeah,
Yeah.
was. That's the thing.
that's
Like,
a
right?
good point.
That's
I
the
forgot
thing
about
where
that.
I've been an Arthur Smith defender. I get it, right? He is not a good head coach when it comes to owning one of his players for fantasy. But I have been an Arthur Smith defender in the sense that it's like everyone's like, what the fuck is he doing? Why is he using Jonnu Smith when he's got Kyle Pitts? And it's like now every year that goes by, it's like, uh, does Kyle Pitts stink? Like, should they just move on from him? Like, is he even, like all that stuff? It's like he might have just seen the vision before any of us. So, like, he was, we were all blinded by that draft capital, and Arthur Smith was like, this kid actually kind of sucks. Like, let's get a real pro in here to catch that ball. But yeah, I mean, tight ends. I don't think there's too much to talk about. I forget the kid's name now. I'm thinking of it's a Pitt tight end. I don't see him on your list, Amaral, but I saw from his pro day. He had a video of his bench press, and I'll send it to you guys after. But he was getting around, right. His whole team was behind him. So to me, I was like, that's pretty dope. You can tell that like they like him in the locker room, all that stuff. But he has smelling salt. He's got it right under his nose. He's like doing this,
Jesus Christ.
throws it away. Then he like slams his back down onto the bench. And then he gets like 15 reps, which would have been the worst by a tight end of the combine that year. So it just
That's
killed me. It was like
great.
the most hardo shit ever to put up the most
That's fucking
underwhelming bench press.
hysterical.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
But just I have two quick things before we wrap up. First, I think we're required by law to mention something about Isaiah Likely whenever he's brought up.
Yes.
So we overlooked that one. And second is last on my list, number 10, is Brant Keithy. And he's had a brutal stretch with injuries the last 3 years. But in 2021, that Utah played a ton of 12 personnel, and he was actually above Dalton Kincaid on the depth chart.
Interesting.
And he was a really good fucking player, but he's been really derailed by injuries over the last 3 years. So I'm hopeful that he can figure it out
That's very interesting. I will definitely
or stay on the field anyway.
yeah, I'm putting let me pull up the stats right now as well. And would you like to say you hinted at it? Would you like to say what it is that we got to say about Likely?
Oh, he's a he's a MIA product, a legend, a state champion. Part of the best team in state history at
Where was it
Everett.
that he went?
What'd you say?
Well, what high school did he play for?
He went to Everett.
Okay. I was gonna say when
Yeah.
when you were shouting out Everett before, I was like somebody else went to Everett,
Well,
and
that Everett team had four NFL players.
that's crazy. Who else?
Lewis Seen, who was a first round pick,
Oh,
but
that's Mikey
his
Bowen's boy. Mike Bowen went
yeah.
to Bridgewater State with his brother.
No
Oh,
shit.
really?
That's
And then Mikey still in Washington.
pretty dope. That's pretty crazy,
Yeah.
actually.
And then Josiah Stewart was the year after. So they
That's
had
not.
five pros in like a 2 year stretch.
Yeah, that is
Powerhouse
true.
State. What can I say? Also, I live down. I'm down in New Jersey, and I live near Don Bosco and St. Joe's, and there's been some insane guys to come out of that. Amaral, you know about those schools?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
The New Jersey like people there was like a big debate up here this year because people were like, "Oh, Catholic Memorial is like the one New England team that could of like the last 10 years that could actually hang with the Jersey Catholics."
Yeah, Joe Giles Harris, Patriot. I've actually partied with him because one of my buddies in college, he went to St. Joe's, and that was like one of his best friends. So Joe Giles Harris, who was an All-American down at Duke, he came up to party with us our senior year, and it was like, holy shit, like this is like pretty crazy. And even my boy Shane, he used to go down and visit him at Duke. He was Daniel Jones's beer pong partner once, so that's pretty crazy because he's a Giants fan as well. So when they drafted Daniel Jones, he's like, that's my boy. Like I've chilled with him, I played beer pong with him. But Joe, he comes, right? He comes up, he's partying with us. We're all pre-gaming at our buddy's place. And we didn't have like a football team or anything. We did have a lacrosse team. They were horseshit. But one of the lacrosse players, they show up in their helmet, and he's already drunk, and he's like, "Yo, I want to do a fucking Oklahoma with a fucking NFL player, dude." So they go out to the yard, and they're both on their fucking backs, and Joe just like pile drives them into the ground. But the whole time, Shane's like, "Joe, like, please think about this because like you're an All-American at Duke. You're probably gonna get drafted. Don't mess this up." And he still did it. He still fucking drove the kid into the ground. And then he got so drunk that when he got to the bar, he got turned away. He couldn't even go. We split an Uber with him, and then they turned this kid away. This massive NFL, like future NFL player. They're like, "No, sorry, dude, you're way too drunk." But yeah, that's my memory. Now he's a Patriot, so pretty cool. But all right, I think that's all we got. We went through all of our positions. I hope anybody watching, of course, I tried to keep it up for as long as I could, but I didn't want to share my screen for the entire conversation. So you can always go back, screenshot those. But yeah, I think maybe we should reconvene after the draft and maybe readjust our rankings based off of draft capital, landing spot, and anything that might change that. And I think personally, I'm going to work on my own power rankings. I'll see how far I want to go with it because, like tight ends, like I said, there's not too many that I want to talk about there, but I think this running back class goes deep. There are some wide receivers I want to talk about as well. So I'm curious to see myself when I put them all together, if I try to put together a top 40, top 50, maybe what I can get out of that. So I guess that's more content left to come. But yeah, we got the NFL draft in 2 weeks. We got the rookie draft 2 weeks after that. So I think somewhere in between that, we can try and schedule something different so we can come in and kind of adjust our rankings and talk a little bit more about any draft reactions. But thank you guys for coming on.
Oh, yo, I just wanted to add one quick thing.
Yeah,
With Show, like, or Shug, or whatever however you pronounce his name, I ranked him second, but like if I were to comp him to somebody, it'd probably be like Ryan Tannehill, just to put that in perspective. Like I don't expect him to end up being like a legitimate star or anything.
that's a solid comp, honestly. And that's like I was saying earlier. It's like if you were told like this kid is going to just be Ryan Tannehill for his career, like how high would you be willing to draft him? Like knowing that you're going to get that where all these other guys are, for better or worse, like a total crapshoot, right? Like even like a guy like Abdul Carter is sure of a thing. Like you never actually know until you
Yeah,
see. So it's like if you had the guarantee that a guy was going to be Ryan Tannehill, who at his peak was actually a pretty solid quarterback. I mean, he walked into Gillette and was able to beat Brady and basically retire him as a Patriot. I think it does become interesting to talk about that. So yeah, I mean that's a guy too. Like I said, we'll see. Once I see where he goes, whether it's a day 2 or a day 3 pick, and what team he ends up on and what situation, I think that could definitely change my ranking around. So, all right, we'll wrap it there.
actually, one last thing too. Yeah, sorry about that. Joe Tooney, though, him switching over to left tackle for the Chiefs with his tiny ass arms, and he's not nearly the athlete that Will Campbell is, does make me feel a lot better about Will Campbell's floor. He'll
Yeah,
probably at
he
least be
was
able to hold up.
and Tooney was good until he just ran into the fucking buzzsaw Eagles
Yeah,
that
the
have like
Eagles D line was unreal.
yeah. But he was good for
Yeah,
like
no,
the
he was
majority of his
really good.
time there. Yeah.
All right.
But that was it. I'm done now.
Yeah. Anything else for me? All right. Thank you guys for coming on. I mean,
Yeah, it
you
was
guys gave
nice
me
talking
plenty
to
of
you
your
guys.
time. I think we just spent about two
Yeah.
hours on this. So I hope any
Yeah, we
viewers
did.
appreciate that as well. I think we got pretty in depth on some interesting prospects that we wanted to highlight. So we will be back I have access to McMorrow's mock draft. Like I said, I think he is totally off base. I think that if he goes by what he sent me, he would be making a grave mistake. But we will see. We will see what's happening. I will try and factor some of that into my next mock draft. Maybe I'll do that next week. But we will be back. Thank you guys for coming on.
Peace. Have a good one.
Peace.